budget retreats. Glad to have Kim back from her travels. And the mayor will be here closer to 1 o'clock. Let's start with a roll call. Gary Garrett.
Dave Sewell.
Callie Hales.
Jerry Hooverton. Ryan Jones.
Amy Stevenson.
Matt Taylor. Tom Dorr. Kate Benjamin.
Jim Untitled.
Willie Parker.
Rachel Stone.
Larry Walters.
Ryan Harvey.
Roger Thomas.
Thomas McKenna.
Doug Robbins.
Bryce Mumford.
Karen Chapati.
John Morgan.
Great, thank you. Hal, would you offer help in the current blessing?
Dear God, at the outset of this meeting, to which each who is here has looked forward, we are grateful for the repast that is ours to enjoy at this lunchtime, and likewise the opportunity for a conversation about matters of import to our city and its future. Thus we pray for a portion of heaven's help in proceedings in the name of Jesus Christ.
Amen.
As I mentioned on Tuesday, at the end of our Tuesday meeting, we have 4 matters to discuss and consider today. The first of which is the RAP tax. And I think we have a presentation relative to that. Roger, are you doing that? I will start. Great. I'll turn the time to you.
Well, thank you so much for inviting us to be a part of your work session here today to talk a little bit more in detail about the RAP tax, as well as to talk to you a little bit about some of the pros and cons of different questions that we've looked at and that we addressed with the Parks and Recreation Board. First of all, I just want to extend to you a warm thank you on behalf of the Parks and Recreation Board for the special meeting that you held with them. They really appreciated that opportunity to get better acquainted with you and to talk about some critical issues, of which the RAP tax was one of those. And then following that meeting, we actually held a special meeting on April 30th with the Parks and Recreation Board to talk about a lot of these same concepts and principles that we're going to address with you today. Now, you should have a lot of the sheets that I will show up here that were emailed to you yesterday. And so I'll try to go through those quickly, but answer any questions that you might have. And at the same time, go through what the recommendations were from the Parks and Recreation Board. So the kind of the 6 concepts that we'd like to address today is first is just kind of give you a quick overview of really what is the RAP tax as far as the state code is concerned and what that is. And then, should Provo City proceed forward with the RAP tax? And then number 3, should the RAP tax be placed on the November 2015 ballot or the November 2016 ballot? And number 4 is if we decide to go with a ballot, do we kind of predetermine maybe what projects will be included? Or do we look at what Orem is doing now, where you have this annual kind of like a CDBG process, and we'll kind of talk about the pros and cons of each of those. And then the ones that are probably most important here are probably number 5 and number 6, which has to do with, well, what projects potentially could be included in a RAP tax? And we're going to split up the presentation. I'll do the first 4, and then Doug Robbins and Thomas McKenna will talk about the last 2. And then number 6 is, if the RAP tax was to pass, do you bond up front for that money to get everything done right up front quickly, or do you just use the allotted amount each particular year? And so those are kind of the 6 main areas we're going to talk about, and then certainly answer any other questions that you may have about either our presentation or concerns you might have about the RAP tax. So with that, let's just jump right into the RAP tax overview. And in your packet that we sent to you last night was I gave you the full code, and I highlighted in yellow kind of the ones that are the key things that really pertain to what I'm going to address now. And so what this sheet is kind of a summary of what that highlighted area is in the state code. So those of you that want to go and read all the legal jargon like Brian does all the time, this will kind of spell it out a little more easily for you. So the first thing we'd like to say is that it must be voted upon by the residents of Provo. It is just a majority vote. It is the imposition of a local sales and use tax of 0.1%. So that's basically 1 penny on every $10. That's kind of what that equates to. And then the tax can be used for these purposes that are up there, for cultural, recreational, and zoological facilities or botanical, cultural, and zoological organizations within the city. There's kind of differentiation between those. And then the tax can be used to finance ongoing operating expenses. And then the city may not impose the tax if the county has already done so. Now, Utah, yes,
You say ongoing expenses within Parks and Rec?
yes, within Parks and Recreation, within these areas that's identified here. And then, of course, the city may not impose the tax if the county has already done so. Utah County has opted not to have a impact fee, or not impact fee, I mean a RAP type tax for the county. And so that's why you see a lot of the cities in Utah County now actually proposing these kinds of taxes to take place. And then the election shall be held at a regular general election or a municipal general election, which typically is in November. And then if the majority votes in favor, even as a council, you still have the right whether you want to implement the tax or not. Even if the voters say yes, the code does allow you to say, well, they may say yes, but we're not going to implement the tax. So you still have that authority to do that even after the election. And then the tax is levied for a 10-year period of time, and then after that 10-year period, you can present it again for another 10 years and another 10 years after that. It just kind of sequentially moves in that direction. And then the collection of the tax takes effect on the first day of the calendar quarter. So in this particular case, if the vote was in November of this year, we could start collecting the tax on January 1 of 2016. That's how that would be.
Roger,
Yes.
on the 10-year period, in the materials it said 8 years or 10 years if it's passed or after July.
After July.
So this presupposes that it would, there's potential for an 8-year time frame as well, right?
Yeah, see, prior to, I think it was 2011, it was actually only for 8 years. But if you are presenting something after that date, then it's now for 10 years. And so it has changed. It's actually gone back and forth. When it was originally put together as the Zoo Arts and Parks tax, it was 10 years, and then it got changed to 8, and now they're back to 10 again. So it's kind of gone back and forth depending on the state legislature wants to do that. And then the last bullet point, which is kind of important to the council here, is a city needs to submit to the county a written notification, submit an opinion question to city residents. And so if it's something you decide to do, then you have to let the county know, and then they have 60 days via a resolution to tell the county, to tell you as a city that the county is not going to impose this tax. And as a result, you can now move forward with a ballot item. And so those are kind of the key points that are highlighted in yellow in the code that kind of summarizes kind of the overview about what this tax is. Now you'll probably notice we're calling it the RAP tax, but it's not identified in the code as a RAP tax. It's just, that's kind of an acronym that many communities use. Some have called it RAP, some have called it PAR, some have called it ZAP, some have called it PARC, P-A-R-C, Orem calls it CARE. And so when you see all these different acronyms, you're really all talking about the same thing. So with that, that's kind of what the code says about the tax. So let's kind of go then to the next question on the agenda, which is item number 2. And this was the question that we actually proposed to the Parks and Recreation Board. And that is, should Provo City proceed forward with a RAP tax to enhance parks, trails, the arts, and recreational facilities? And what we did is we gave them kind of the pros and the cons, and these lists could be a mile long, but we kind of picked out what we against to combine with other revenue sources. So where we have our impact fees, we have grants, land sales, other forms of revenue coming in, you can bond the RAP tax amount and combine it with all these others to actually accomplish a lot of projects right up front rather than waiting through the entire 10-year period of time. The third bullet point is this tax will go a long way in upgrading existing facility capital needs that never seem to be funded anyway. As you look at the budget proposal you have now, there's really not a whole lot of general fund money that goes in to support capital improvements for parks. And this is one kind of tax that would really address that issue and help us make some major steps forward in addressing existing facility needs that we can't seem to do any other way. And then the next bullet, it is a tax, a sales tax, so most people would not even know that they're paying the tax. I don't know how you, when you go shopping, you look at your receipt and find out how much you paid in sales tax. Not too many people really do that. So it's kind of a tax that kind of can be disguised a little bit. I don't know how else to describe it, but that's how it could be. And then the next bullet point, those who shop in Provo from other communities would help pay for the tax and improvements, taking some of the burden off of Provo City residents. So that's the real advantage of this tax, different from a property tax. And then right now, the last bullet, Provo City residents who currently shop in Orem are already paying the tax to benefit Orem and not Provo. So you, if you're shopping in Orem, you could be helping have that sales tax help you get a care tax in Orem. And looking at some of the cons, once again, it's a tax and would increase the local sales tax by 1/10 of 1%. It must be voted upon by the majority of the city residents. It will require a tremendous educational effort to pass the measure. And then, of course, possible dissension on how the tax is to be spent. So those are kind of the pros and cons. So as these were presented to the Parks and Recreation Board, they had quite a discussion about this, but it was very obvious to them that they felt that the benefits outweighed the negatives. And so their recommendation to the council is that the council should move forward with a RAP tax. Any questions yet, Mary?
Roger, did the board express any interest in, you mentioned here the educational effort, similar to what happened with Ubon,
Right.
some kind of grassroots organization that would help educate and inform the benefits of a RAP tax?
Yeah, and certainly that would have to happen. There would have to be that grassroots effort in order to sell the advantages of the bond.
If the rec center board didn't necessarily say we would do that effort or be involved.
I think many of them would like to be a part of that. We can't officially do it as a Parks and Recreation Board because that's tied to the city. It actually has to be a separate grassroots citizen group like we did for the Recreation Center. Okay, well, let's go to the next sheet, which talks a little bit about if that's the case, if the council decides you want to move forward, do we go on the November 2015 ballot or do we go on the November 2016 ballot? These were some of the pros and cons about November 2015. The first one is currently there's no other Provo City or Utah County tax measure that is planned for the ballot. Now, that could change with the county, but right now there currently isn't one. Tax revenue would be available effective January 1 for projects that I've mentioned to you. There appears to be momentum and support from elected officials to move forward. We kind of sensed that a little bit, at least that you might want to consider moving in that direction. And then recent survey data that the community had responded to shows that 74% of city residents strongly support the ballot measure. So that's a really high number. That's even higher than it was for the Recreation Center before we went out for that bond.
Who did that survey and how was it done?
Quinn Robinson, BYU. It was I think the sample size was roughly 1,500 voters. So it wasn't just residents, it was specific voters. So.
And then the last bullet point there is if Utah County places their item on the November 2016 ballot, then we get ahead of their sales tax measure, which is kind of an advantage to do that. Kind of the cons to this, I'm really sorry, I've been fighting a cold and cough here, so I apologize for that.
Robert, can I ask you a
Yeah.
question? You say then, ahead of their measure, will they impose it on Provo City then? If the county comes in, they can do it in addition to our tax? Or would we?
He's talking about it.
It's not a RAP tax.
He's talking about their.
No, just their sales
Oh, their
tax.
sales tax.
They're at 0.25%.
Well, then let's ask about, say, the RAP tax. Could they put a RAP tax in addition to the city RAP tax?
No, that's why you need to notify the county that you're interested.
And they can't do it for 10 years.
No, they couldn't do it.
They could
There's zero
continue to do it, but they couldn't apply it to Provo.
They're not going to take
So they could do it,
a RAP
say we
tax.
decided, if we didn't do this here and they did, It would apply to Provo, but no, the one right now.
And they made it pretty clear they're not interested in running any kind of a tax that's very similar, because they don't really have a parking appropriation system run by Utah County. And then the cons is Utah County may consider placing a 0.25% sales tax increase on the ballot for transportation, streets, roads, which could create a conflict with two sales tax measures on the ballot at the same time, which is not good. So the county did change their mind, then November of this year probably isn't a good idea. And then as you're aware, there are 5 Provo City Municipal Council seats up for election that could dilute the RAP tax educational materials distributed, or it could become a political issue during candidate campaigns. And then by the time a decision is made to support the opinion question, there may be a short but doable time frame to pull off a successful campaign. So as the Parks and Rec Board looked at that, they felt very strongly that they really wanted to look at November of 2015 in regard to that. You have the page for 2016. I don't necessarily need to go through that because that's not their recommendation. The only time that they would maybe consider going 2016 is if the county decided to go to 0.25% this November, and it didn't make a whole lot of sense to put the two of them on the same time, because it doesn't help either one of them. So let's skip that one and go to the next one, which is the next question is there's a lot of thought about what is the best way to present this tax. If you've read in the paper today, Orem has set up their committee and they're going through their tax process of determining what projects and how much to give out, and they go through this process every single year. Versus, do you go through a predetermined list of different projects that might be considered, and then the voters actually vote on that and ahead of time of what they do. So this sheet here kind of talks about the predetermined project method, which is what the Parks and Recreation Board is recommending to the council, that this is what you should do. And they kind of listed the pros here. Is this allows the voters the opportunity to know in advance what will be completed when they vote. This allows for pre-planning and prioritization of projects based on the Provo City Parks and Recreation Master Plan. And the projects cover a good cross-section of the city and determine what is the best revenue source in order to complete that project. And then it eliminates the pressure applied by certain special interest groups that may try to push a project or service forward that is not a high priority or a good use of the funds. And so those are the pros, the cons. It may get too project specific, which could turn some voters off because a project is on the list or isn't included on the list. It takes a lot of pre-planning, which you can tell we've done a lot. We're going to show that to you here in a minute. And the community may not feel that they were involved much in the project selection process, yet the master plan process was really when that whole project list was created. So that's kind of their recommendation on moving forward with this predetermined list. So as far as the 3 recommendations that the Parks and Recreation Board have indicated is they really say, yes, the council should really consider moving forward with a RAP tax, that the council should consider basically November of 2015, and that we should take to the voters a predetermined list of what they'd be voting on when they actually voted in November. So those are kind of the key recommendations that they made to you. I'm going to turn some time over to Doug and Thomas to kind of go through now what are some of these projects and things that are on this list, and then to talk about, do we really bond or do we not bond against the amount that could be generated? So let me turn some time over to Doug and then they'll address that section.
Hey, Mark, quick question.
Yes.
You said that you read that statement again here about not, Provo City was not currently other Provo City or Utah County tax measures planned for the ballot. Were they aware of any fee changes? And I think we did. Were they not aware of a possible tax increase at the time that this was presented to them?
But that wouldn't occur in November.
It would be on the ballot in November.
Which one? If it's a sales tax on gas.
No.
Property tax.
Other Provo City law, it says Provo City, and we were talking possibly about it.
This was,
I
when this
think
was
the taxation
done,
this year.
this was done during the session, so when was it?
Yeah, and then it was done during the session
This was done like in March,
in March. This was April 30th,
that what was?
their recommendation.
Right, this was the board's recommendation. Oh, sorry. I'm talking about the survey that was done, and you're talking about,
No, I'm not talking, I'm talking about the.
You're talking about for the
recommendation
board.
For the park.
okay.
There are things that were on Provo City that, as far as taxes.
That are being considered.
It's not on the ballot.
Yeah, they
And
didn't
that's
know
what,
that at the time.
that's what I was asking.
So-
If they knew it, then
It's on our agenda for this meeting.
So if there's some other bond measure that you're considering for November, they would not have known that at April 30th, when they made that recommendation, because they're under the impression that there's no other city proposal on the November ballot that
okay,
Provo City would be voting on, so.
okay.
Now, as far as the property tax, the truth in lending taxation, I don't know what that's called, but I think that's done in August, isn't it? In August.
You have to have done it on
And so
before
that would
August.
be done prior to any November election. Yeah, Gary?
So Roger, relative to the predetermined project method and this recommendation from the board that be included in the education, do they see that being a 10-year list of potential projects or just one year? Here's what we would do in the next year with these funds?
It's actually a list of 10 years worth of projects, and we'll go over that with you on the different categories that we're looking at. And realizing that the numbers that John had given us did not include any potential increases in sales tax over that 10-year period of time. So that's kind of a standard rate. I think you said it was like maybe 1.5% increase that could occur, which could potentially create more revenue than what we're even projecting. We're doing it conservatively. And then if there were new needs that came up or new projects, then that money could be applied to some of those. Okay, yes.
So when they're earmarking funds or earmarked with the rec tax, does it say specifically how much goes to parks, how much goes to arts? When all goes was divided.
Yeah, what the Parks and Recreation Board is suggesting is that those all be predetermined in regard to how much would be going to parks, recreational facilities, existing facilities, the arts, visionary projects, and we'll kind of outline that for
We
you.
can determine that, how much goes where, is it pre-designated where it goes?
Yeah, that's what they're suggesting, that we predetermine that before the voters vote on it. So that we don't do what Orem is doing, which is like the CDBG process that you do now, where these groups come in every single year and they request more money than what's available, and then you have people that either don't get enough or they become dependent on that money to run their operation.
And it consumes lots of time.
Lots of time and energy. Whereas if you have it right up front, it's a whole lot better. And just, I've talked to a lot of Parks and Recreation directors throughout the state that have already done this. And those who basically that have done the predetermined projects like it so much better. And those that have gone the other way say, I wish we'd done it the other way. We've done the predetermined project.
Back to now, Huckmeyer's article today that you referred to, Carol makes that very clear. I wonder, have you gotten the extent of programming the expenditures if we rely strictly on annual revenues over 10 years, for 10 years, as opposed to bonding up front?
Right.
And using
We have. So let me turn the time over to Doug, and that's his section of the discussion, and we can present that to you, how we would break this down, whether it's a bond or no bond.
Thanks, Roger. As was mentioned earlier, we tried to approach this in an effort to communicate clearly some defined outcomes from doing this type of approach. We've seen other communities do it different ways. We thought it'd be great to just have a very predictable outcome. So we put together several spreadsheets that kind of describe some of the priority projects that we would recommend starting with. And these are all based on feedback from the Parks and Recreation Master Plan and the community needs survey that was completed as part of that master plan process. And so the first spreadsheet, I think that you've seen, I think it's in your packet, and we've mailed a working copy out before. It's titled Working Draft Project List Wrap Tax Bond Option. So the first sheet shows the bond option and the different categories of projects that would be funded. So the first one on the left side of your spreadsheet, here you go, involves trail improvements. and trailheads. Our master plan indicated, our survey data actually indicated that trails and walking paths are one of the very highest value and needed recreation facilities within the city.
Yeah.
Okay, so here you see several pathway and trail projects that are needed within the city. Around PRT is the Provo River Trail, Moon River, the Cottonwood Greenway behind Pomosi, the Granbury Greenway, 5200 to 5600 north on the far north extremity of the Provo River Trail. Overall widening and resurfacing the trail. The objective here is to try to, the last time this trail was paved, the first time it was paved was back in 98. And so it's been several years. There's several sections of the trail that are very narrow. The objective is to try to widen this trail and bring it up to the Murdoch Canal Trail type standard, which we feel we can do with this opportunity.
Does this go up into the canyon?
It would go up to the city limits right about 5600 north by that substation at the mouth of the canyon.
After that, it's Utah.
That's
Utah
Utah County.
County's in charge of it from there on out.
That's
Oh,
correct.
okay. That's where it's really.
I think there's a little gap right here. So I guess the canyon.
There's some pretty significant, we'll call them craters,
Yeah.
cracks, and anyway.
And as the community continues to grow, the use of the trail really continues to increase as well, and we need to build our capacity there. And then the rest of these are other pathway and trail improvements in different parks where we have asphalt pathways. So we've got kind of some estimates on each one of those. These are a list of new parks. We can scroll over just a little bit. And again, these were some that are have been on our past CIP plans, and some that were recommended in our Parks and Recreation Master Plan.
So I have a question for you. If Utah County doesn't have any Parks and Recreation money, I guess, or if they don't have anything for that section, does this come from roads, does this come from sidewalks? Where do they get the money to actually fix the trail up the canyon if they don't have a Parks and Rec need or need for a rat tax or a, you see what I'm asking? Where does that money come from?
From Utah County standpoint, I really can't say. I know that the public works departments are involved in the trail sections, yeah. But I really don't know that as far as Utah County is concerned. So here's a list of the recommended parks that we would build over the next 10 years. What we thought of doing is combining all of the revenue sources that are available to us, and trying to maximize and leverage all the funding sources to get as far down the road as we can. Again, the expectations of our master plan. So acquiring land for an improved sports complex in the southwest area of town. Bicentennial Park expansion is a priority. A dog park was also listed. Stutz Park, constructing Stutz Park. Sunset View expansion. Spring Creek Park, full construction there. And expansion of Slate Canyon, Canyon Road Park construction, and Foothill Park. So we've got those total there. Some other projects came up that didn't quite meet the priority list as far as we're concerned. There's several others as well. And then the big group, the existing facility upgrades. Yes?
Were those listed in priority according to the board, or they're just up there?
Not necessarily. It's just a group.
But the other projects that you have listed, no funding on the bottom.
They were in those estimates. Yeah, our Parks and Recreation Master Plan really spoke heavily in the survey data that we received from our residents that the first priority they would really like to see us address is maintaining what we currently have, and then pursuing new additional opportunities after that. So this column involves a long list of facility improvements that we've identified within the system, and that our consultants identified as well to enhance existing facilities. So they involve restroom facility upgrades. Some of these restrooms are extremely old and don't really meet the capacity needs that we have right now. Some of these here would be restrooms that exist right now, but I guess the skeleton of the structure is sound. We just need to go in and make some upgrades within the buildings themselves. Sports facilities, we run thousands of people a week through our sports facilities, and they're not getting a whole lot of capital improvement. And so this would give us an opportunity to enhance those and make them safer and more useful. We had quite a playground construction period about 18 years ago, where we constructed several playgrounds, more than a dozen. They're all starting to time out and need to be replaced with ADA accessible playgrounds. In this case, that's what an adaptive playground is. And then the rest of these are all timed out as well. Tennis court renovation. The Rotary Park tennis courts are cracking, getting to a point where they're becoming less and less safe to play on. And once parking needs to be resurfacing as well. Lighting upgrades within our parks. Several of them have old lighting systems. These would have a cost recovery in lower energy use, and then several of these don't have lighting systems that meet them. They're adjacent to the trail system, and it's more of a safety type function here. Several parking lots that haven't been replaced in 15, 20, even 30 years. They're on their old pavilions that have timed out, need to be replaced to meet the current demand in our parks. Some wayfinding signage, and Lions parking lot, we've got that one funded in our central control system. Moving on, Covey Center for the Arts. In this scenario, we've got $500,000 over the 10-year period as a bond option that we go toward the Covey Center public art programs. We have a couple of visionary projects as well. Here, the Water Trail Park along the Provo River. Our consultants identified a huge untapped resource for outdoor recreation. We'd like to do a feasibility study with some hydrologic studies to see how we can better utilize the river for whitewater type venue. And the Utah Lake Beach Park, potentially partnering with Utah state parks and other agencies to enhance the opportunities there at the Road Harbor. Okay, if you want to zoom out a little bit, this is the bond option. It includes all the projects that we had on that priority list. And then we also had prepared another spreadsheet.
Which one do you want, Doug? The next tab?
Yeah, the next one. Okay, that'd be great. And so as we're doing this, as you ran numbers, we start to see some trends develop. And so this is the same information that's shown in a 10-year CIP type format. And again, it's just a working draft, because anytime you change one of these numbers, it tends to change a lot of the different factors. But I think it illustrates fairly well what happens when you consider a bond option. The first year or two, you're going to see a lot of upfront improvement of existing facilities. There's restrooms, pavilions, parking lots, trail improvements would take place almost immediately because they're funded that first or second year. Some of these projects that you see that extend out over the 10-year term are due to those are the new park developments, and those are really dependent on impact on revenues. Impact revenues, that's a different revenue stream and have different requirements for utilizing those funds. These other outliers here are due to a certain amount of carryover that we have to, I can't remember what the term is, John. The credit carryover for the bond amount each year.
What's that? The margin of error. You're talking about the basically the debt coverage ratio?
Yes, debt coverage ratio. So $186,000 annually used to be rolled over each year. And so that becomes bankrolled, and as soon as there's enough money to complete a project, that would trigger the construction or the renovation of that project. So see it throughout that way.
Did you calculate the maintenance cost of the new parks?
Yeah.
These figures?
No, these are just construction costs. So we'll get to the O&M costs a little bit later. But anyway, the takeaway from this is you see with a bond option, you see a lot of front-loaded projects first couple of years.
And we realize this is kind of real small print, so we'll send all this to you electronically, and then you can kind of blow it up on computers as it's a really long chart.
It was hard to get 10 years all on one page.
Yeah. So you want to go to the next, the bond option?
Sure. So this is the no bond option. You see a few changes, looks relatively the same, but a few of these we're able to add a couple of projects in to this because of the lack of the bonding fees that are required. So,
Did the Parks and Rec Board give a recommendation for them?
They did, and we can get into that a little bit later too. Let me just show you all of this. This shows the no bonding option, and you can see they're a little bit more scattered out, and that's because you're going to have to, wait to begin construction on a project until those funds have reached a sufficient level in the accounts to start building those projects. One thing that you have to remember also is the time value of money. So some of these projects towards the end, $1 10 years from now won't buy as much as it will today. And so that's one thing that is kind of it's a variable that we need to take into account.
Question, just to be clear, these proposals include the use of impact fees. And so these are funded from, all these projects are funded from the RAP and the impact fees, and I think.
Yes.
So this is,
All revenue
these
sources.
will not be funded solely by RAP.
And so you see here again.
The color code, the yellow represents the RAP tax, the green is impact, orange is county grant, and then the purple is a combination.
That's all.
Yeah, sorry about that. Again, you see the new park development, it kind of falls in that category. Again, it's dependent on impact fees. It's pretty restricted as far as how you spend those, so those will extend over the 10-year period. See there. Next page. Okay, now we get into what dollars we buy. The time value of money, we decided to go in and research historical construction cost indexes for projects such as this. And you see we have information going all the way back to 1964. For the past 40 years, you see how costs have increased over time. You see about year 2008, there's a little bit of a leveling out period there where the cost of doing projects for about 3 years didn't increase much at all. But since then it has. And so that's something we need to take into account if we look at the no bond option. Okay. So Thomas, would you like to take over this?
So we looked at,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So what if, what was in the downturn in the economy in 2009, what did we lose as far as sales tax revenue during that time? So we're assuming that it's going to stay the same in your projections, but what if it doesn't go up and if it goes down instead? And we bond against it? Is that significant? Is it pretty stable? Is it?
Well, it definitely is a factor. We 2 years in a row before the economy went down, we were over $17 million in annual sales tax revenue. We're still not to that level now, 5 years later. So it takes a while to recover when you have a significant hit like that. And so they mentioned it briefly, but one of the things that's recommended if you do bond is that you provide for a margin of error so that if there were a downturn in the economy, you're better prepared for it. And typically when you go out and bond, if you're bonding on a certain revenue source, they won't loan 100% of value to you anyway, because they have the same concerns. So they have what's called the debt coverage ratio. And normally it needs to be at least 125%. And so, for example, if you had 10 million in revenues, in simple terms, the most you could bond for would be about 7.5 million. So that 7.5 million gives you room that if sales tax were to drop. The theory is over time it's not going to drop below that $7.5 million number. So, but the good news is that if you do bond for less, assuming that the revenue comes in when it's available, you still have the option to use those additional dollars for other projects over the life of the RAP tax. So that's a little bit of background.
Does that 25% include the bonding costs, the issuances, and the interest and those kinds of things?
Well, when we looked for projections, what we did is we used a conservative number. We used 4%, which could change, but right now it's fairly conservative. And our assumption was that 4% would cover those issuance costs. but there are issuance costs that would be related to it, and that drives the cost of your interest number up a little bit. But we're around 3 to 3.25 right now in today's environment. So 4%, assuming things don't go crazy in the next 6 months, should be adequate to cover the issuance costs.
Okay, this sheet here illustrates that graph earlier.
Just wanted to clarify one thing. I'm assuming that these are not inflation adjusted numbers on construction costs.
Yeah, I mean, this index, we've projected some cost increases. And I'm assuming that does, and to my understanding, it does include inflation.
Yeah, so.
That's history though, so that would just be actual.
Actual, yeah. So if you adjusted this for inflation, I just did a quick calculation, about 75% of this is due to inflation. So in other words, the construction costs are increasing faster than inflation, but not in that process.
So since 1964, for 2014, there's an average cost index increase of 3.69%. Interesting to note, between 2000 and 2014, that index was a little over 6 months annually. So if you run this out, this table can help illustrate a little bit more about the pros and cons of going with bond or without bond.
So if we look at our projected bond cost is a little over $2 million. If the cost index continues at the current rate, over the last 14 years, the cost increase is going to be about almost $2.7 million, which shows would say it would be good to bond. If there's a 5-point increase over the next 10 years, it still costs less to bond now rather than to potentially lose those costs in construction cost increases. So if you look at the historical though, and again, looking back at what it's been doing over the last 14 years, we would be ahead about $400,000. So, from our analysis, we're looking at, somewhere in probably the 5 to, we can't obviously predict the future, but, assuming that it continues, it's our recommendation that, I think bonding is the better way to go.
And as that was described to our Parks and Recreation Board, that was their conclusion as well as what we were seeing with the bond.
This just assumes bonding for the RAP tax only.
Only the RAP tax.
One of the concerns with impact fees, as you're all aware, is that it's very even more subject to the economy than the tax would be. So it makes it even more of a challenge to bond for it. If the project was held up, a large project for a couple of years, or didn't happen, or things but I think the sales tax would be a more stable source if you provide adequate coverage.
On these projected costs, then, is that just reflective of the RAP tax projects? Or is that your whole?
This is just on the RAP tax revenue.
Okay, so it's the projects, or just the RAP tax projects? Or are they total projects that you're?
I think you said that those were included with impact and.
So this.
Get those projects.
You're only bonding the RAP tax.
We're only
bonding the RAP tax.
Right, but the comparison for the construction cost included all the construction.
It would include all construction.
And impact, it would include impact fees with your projects included impact fees and
CDBG funds.
County grant and land sales.
All right, we put together a quick comparison of bonding and no bonding options. The bonding option allows an accelerated improvement of existing facility needs, with most projects complete within the first year of the RAP term. Without the bond, it would be a slower improvement of these facility needs as RAP funds accumulate over the years. The bond allows RAP bond allows financing fees at over $2 million. That's the cost of the fees, and we showed that it's about 16% of the total RAP funding. However, on the other side, with no bond, the loss of RAP funding purchasing value each year due to increasing construction costs based on those indexes is certainly a factor. Tends to be, depending on your projection, tends to be a little bit more favorable. Opportunities for economies of scale and packaging jobs with a bonding option is certainly an opportunity to take advantage of that would exist with no bond. Our revenue bond interest rates are at historic lows right now, and in the future there may be construction cost variation going no bond. The bonding option gives us an opportunity to provide these public needs that were expressed in our survey data in a quick time frame, whereas no bond would be a less quick response. And then, as Roger mentioned, a little bit more potential for adjusted priorities and plans as these are reviewed year after year. New park development is dependent on non-bonded impact fees. Those would be collected annually for 10 years. That's the same for each option, as well as operation and maintenance costs, because those new park construction projects would happen over the term. I will quickly look at operation and maintenance costs. When you're looking at existing site facility improvements, the restrooms and pavilions can be replaced, we don't really project any increased cost involved with those adjustments, those improvements, because they exist now. In some ways, there might be a small benefit as far as costs are concerned. New park construction, that's all dependent on impact fees. These development impact fees by state statute require that the funds only be used to cover new park and recreational facilities that are needed to maintain the existing levels of service that are affected by community growth. So it's all dependent on growth. So impact fees cannot be used to cover maintenance, repair or replacement of current facilities. So that's why those are the best funds to really use for new park construction. So as these impact fees accrue and accumulate over this period of time, we can utilize those for that. Of course, that could speed up or slow down depending on the growth rate of growth, as well as John said. So as we calculated some of the maintenance costs, at this point in time, there are a few things we need to assume. And of course, all the potential new park sites haven't been designed yet, so it's hard to prepare cost estimates based on a site that doesn't have any site features at this point. So we really need construction documents in order to get really accurate cost estimations. One example of that is the splash pad at Pioneer Park that was recently built. That one element alone, because of the electrical demand and use of water and filtration systems, it's quite an extensive system that added between $27,000 and $30,000 annually to funding for that park that had to come from somewhere. So you can see if you design a park with a splash pad, it's going to be a major element of that ongoing overhead cost. And then most of our estimates are really targeted toward direct costs that are specific to that new site. And we try to avoid indirect costs as well. And again, they're based on current dollar values. So Spring Creek Park at 5 acres, we're somewhere between $6,500 and $8,000 per acre. We're calculating right now. Slate Canyon Site A, that's the north side, or I'm sorry, down by Slate Canyon Drive, 7.2 acres, about $57,000 a year. Stutz Park, Canyon Road, they're all based on acreage at this point. The outdoor sports complex, we really have no idea how big, the size of that facility, but cost per acre on those sports fields tends to go down because we achieve economies of scale by using large game mowers, and those costs are much lower than the small acreage parks on average. Same thing with the dog park. We don't really know where that would be. At this point, we just finished the first one, so we'll have to assess where that would be and how big need to be, but the cost on that, ongoing cost would be relatively low as well. Any questions on operational needs?
On those are gonna be paid out of the RAP tax? Or what, how are those costs gonna be?
Yeah, at this point, they aren't included in our RAP tax calculations. We would consider those to be potentially paid for like all other, O&M costs through our general budget.
So you have about 8,000 per acre average on these, is that what your average is across the city?
On this, on these, it's just based on, a facility of similar size. We actually base these on the cost of maintaining our new park. One thing also to remember is these costs would come in all at once. If you staggered over that 10-year period as impact fees are accumulated in the park to be constructed. And prioritized, however.
So you don't include any of the O&M in the RAP tax money because it doesn't sell, or because I mean, that's what the need is. I can see some new construction, but also the maintenance. I mean, I'm sure people understand that if you build something, you have to maintain it. And so it would make sense that could be used for some operation and maintenance, but that's not.
Our approach has been to just limit our RAP tax funding scenario to be new construction of new parks and also existing facilities. It's more of a capital approach. I guess we've seen other communities that do it a little bit differently. We find, that once facilities are constructed and they're improved, it becomes kind of dependent on that ongoing O&M budget through the RAP fund. If that's ever changed, that puts the facility into operation. So that's why we've approached it this way. It's possible.
Well, I think that pretty much concludes our presentation that we were going to make today, and I realized we give you a lot of data, a lot of information to think about. But just to refresh your memory on at least what the recommendations were of the Parks and Recreation Board is based on the pros and cons. They felt very strongly that it's a tax that we should be moving forward with, and that we should consider maybe presenting it to the voters in November of 2015, and that as working as a council, the administration, with the Parks and Recreation Board and staff, we actually determine what that final list of projects really looks like. Realizing this is all draft stuff that was different scenarios we're giving you. We worked together to find exactly what that is. They felt very comfortable about how we have it divided up in regard to parks, trails, and trailheads, which is kind of existing, repairing those, looking at new parks, looking at the existing parks with all those different categories of how we can replenish what we already got, looking at some going towards the arts and some of the visionary projects, and then tying all of that in with the current revenue sources that we have, the park impact fees, the CDBG monies, the Utah County Municipal Recreation Grant, the land sales and other things that we already have as other revenues that we'd like to look at. And so by doing all of that, they feel very strongly we can accomplish a lot of the things that were developed in the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. You always are concerned when you develop and approve a plan, well, how are you going to fund all of this and make it happen? So that when 20 years comes by, you can look back and say, gosh, look what we accomplished. And this RAP tax is one of those sources of funding that we're really missing out on, because a lot of communities are generating. If you know Orem, theirs is $1.9 million that they're now able to disperse each year. We're losing technically $1.261 million every year by not doing this. And we feel very strongly that it's a very sellable thing. Based on the survey data that's been out recently, it appears that there is support in the community for this kind of thing. And I go to a lot of public meetings and different neighborhood meetings, and I know there's a lot of needs in the community, but the number one thing I hear all the time, we want a park in our neighborhood. We want more trails in our neighborhoods. We want more things to upgrade the existing park that's in our neighborhood. I hear that all the time. And so I think this is a no-brainer from my perspective as a Parks and Recreation professional to say we're really missing out on something by not moving forward, and would certainly encourage the council to take a look at what we need to do. We realize we have some tight time schedules here in order to make a decision. Do we move forward because of notifying the county and then 60 days that they need to get back, and then the time frame we need to get on the ballot? There's a lot of those different things, and then how you set up this grassroots committee that would actually go out and really sell this to the community, where they can actually say, vote yes on this proposal, whereas the city, we can't say how to vote, we can just provide the educational materials so that they can make the decision. We can't say vote yes or no. So in general terms, that's kind of what we want to present to you today, and hopefully that's been helpful, and we're here now to answer any of the questions you have. Thank you.
Could you give an example or two of a visionary project? What does that look like? What are the visionary projects that, there's more money slated for those than there are for the arts, and I was just curious as to what that might.
The way we classify as visionary projects are those projects that are kind of out there that would be really nice to do and really put Provo on the map, and that's why we have the Water Trail Park, which is having a lot of different elements on the Provo River Trail to bring people to the trail, whether it's with kayaking, canoeing, rafting, other types of amenities that could really make that trail very, very nice for the community, so that it's just not a walking trail. The other is the Utah Lake Beach Park that we talked about, and the feasibility study is being produced right now. We're working in conjunction with the Utah State Park and actually developing a nice beachfront so that the citizens of Provo could go and look at. So those are kind of what we're talking about as visionary projects, are the ones that probably aren't the ones we're going to build right now, but we need to kind of design, think about it, and knowing that down the road we'd be looking at it. And if you look at the time frame, we're probably looking at them being kind of further out in the 10-year time schedule.
I have a question about that. Covey Center, say $50,000 a year. Is that to reduce the subsidy from the general fund, or is that additional programming to the Covey Center?
Okay, if you look at the two different options, there's kind of two different ways we've approached that. If we go the no bond issue measure, then it would be the $50,000 each year, and that would go for capital improvements within the facility and for public art. That's kind of, as we addressed it with the Parks and Recreation Board, they kind of felt like those were the major needs. Like, for example, the Covey Center now is about 7 years old. During this additional 10-year period, we're going to be into 7 to 17 years, and there's going to be needs for replacement for carpet, for lighting systems, for big drapes. There's needs to expand storage areas, as well as set producing areas, storage areas for costumes, and other types of things that they would use at the Covey Center. And so at this point, it's not set up for any groups at all, basically to enhance and improve the Covey Center, or to develop a public art program along Center Street and other locations in community parks. So that's kind of what that intent would be at this point. Yes, okay.
I want to make an unpopular comment. This is RAP tax for the recreation, arts, and parks. And I see it, I'm very biased, I see it as people sacrifice so much to build the Covey Center, and then their budget is so small. We have the stinkiest arts program for a community I've ever seen. And I think that we should, that's way over what you would think, but a third should go to the arts in our community. A society is only as healthy as the arts in their community. And we have a really bad reflection in the arts in our community. It's very weak and it's very poorly funded. And I think we should give more consideration to helping our arts program out of this pit of doom.
And that's the discussion that you'll need to have as a council.
I really feel strongly about that.
Let me just mention kind of the rationale behind where it is now is, we built the recreation center with the bond funds that we did when it was passed in 2010. And so we have a lot of great indoor recreational facilities. We built the Covey Center for the Arts, which was to be that facility for a lot of the mom and pop groups that could come and have their dance recitals and other things there and other programs. But the other main thing is the survey data that came through on the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. And that's why, a lot of the things that you're seeing here were all driven by the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. And the Parks and Recreation Master Plan addressed the arts, but in a way that it was actually already addressed. And so that's kind of how we got that from the survey data that came through the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. And so that's why the arts in this particular case is looked at maybe a little bit less than parks. And for example, parks has never really been addressed. And so that's why you see a lot of this is very park heavy, because we just haven't had the funding to really ever do anything with parks. But if it's the decision of the council that you want to adjust those, that's certainly your prerogative to do that. But at least based on the Parks and Recreation Board and looking at the total needs of the department from parks, recreation, trails, and the arts. They felt like this was a really good effort that would still address the arts and the needs that they have with the facility, address the public art, but really spend more with the parks and the recreational facilities on those parks. So that was kind of the rationale behind that.
It looks like, as I look at the budget here, I can see the big jump because of, in O&M because of the rec center. And of course, some of that's offset with the incomes that we get from that, but it looks like we're about a $600,000 increase every year, previous to parks and attaching to the rec center. Is that what you continue to see with the addition of these?
With these new parks?
With these new parks coming in, $600,000 to $700,000 a year increase in O&M?
No.
O&M
Yeah, go ahead.
showed about 470 over 10 years spread out.
470 over 10 years
Correct.
on the new.
Yes. So it'd be
Wait, so that's
Except
not.
that's just on the new then.
I mean, once the 10 years hits, that would be annual. But, with the impact fees, again, these new parks are implemented, over the 10-year period. So you would see these come on incrementally.
Yeah, so it's not all at once,
Not all
until you
at
get to
once,
right to the
right.
very end, and then they would have them all at that point. And like I said, we've addressed the O&M with the general fund. That's how we've done it with everything else, and we have not addressed it with using these funds. And if you start using the O&M to cut with these tax monies, then it reduces the number of other projects that will now have to fall off the list, because you now don't have that money available to do those things. Yes, okay.
And then maybe it's for John, how you want to be on the bonding. I'm assuming we've got a 10-year. If we go with the tax, a 10-year commitment, is the bond the same time period? Is the bond
It couldn't be any longer, it would have to.
Aren't the bonds generally more to 15 to 20 years?
Yeah, but you would be limited to 10 years here because you're subject to another election. And so the bonding would have to follow the same time period.
So that's how the bond would have to be set up.
Yeah, they do 10-year bonds. They're done on, usually a little longer, but they're done as well, so that wouldn't be a problem.
And a second question, on both the bond option and the no bond option, the comment was made earlier that the master plan, the surveys from the community, the highest priority that you got back from that was to maintain and upkeep the existing facility.
That's correct.
But then I look at how we're going to spend this, and it looks like existing facility upgrade is like 23% on one option, 25% on another option. So,
Okay, existing facilities, you got to look at the parks and trails. Yeah, you got to look at the very first column, which is all the parks and trails, because a lot of that is basically redoing existing facilities, and then you look at the existing facility column, so you're going to add both of those together. And so we're doing a substantial
okay, so that
amount.
puts us at 46. And
Yeah,
But-
so
but
you
the
got to add
parks isn't
the
being
4
funded
million
by
plus
the
this
tax.
number down here. Right. So if you look at this column over here, so you got the trails is about 4 million, and existing facility is about 6.8. So you're putting in about, that's 23.81 and 13. So it's closer to almost 37%.
And then also remember the new park development would be funded predominantly through the
Impact fees.
So
Okay, so that 58% isn't from the RAP tax.
that don't reflect just the RAP tax, the total revenue.
Yeah.
I personally am supportive of the recommendations made by the board. But in the spirit of our conversation on Tuesday, being that we did not attend, we considered there the merits of always foregrounding Vision 2030 as the basis for our legislative priorities as a municipal council. And lately I've heard from you, but I didn't in your presentation. It was only when Doug spoke that I heard any reference to your master plan. And it seems to me that as you prepare for the election, that is the decision, that there's advantage to be gained from consistently referring to the master plan. This is the guiding document. These are the marching orders. These are the directions in which we're proceeding. And everything that we have recommended under either option, bonding or non, is consistent with the master plan. over and over, I think that's what he did.
That needs to be the message, because that's actually how this was all put together, was using that document. And that document was based on Vision 2030, the downtown plan, and a lot of other plans that were actually put together also in addition to that. So that's why it's a good combination of everything.
Pretty cool drum.
Absolutely.
And that really, I mean, just one thing, when we met with the Park and Recreation Board, that really hit home to them as well. As we talked about the master plan, and they're like, yeah, that's the vision that we have. And this is how we, this is the plan to implement it.
And that's why they really like the breakdown that's up there, because it does address the trail system, which was the #1 part that was actually noted in the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. It was the #1 item, walking and biking and those things. It was the #1 facility, and yet it's really deteriorating to the point that it's not like a Murdoch Canal Trail anymore. And we need to really bring it up to the level that it really deserves to be in the community. So that's why you can see there's quite a bit of money that's put there. And then, of course, the new parks, with really addressing all the needs in the existing parks, because we do have an old park system. We've got lots of parks, but it's starting to deteriorate. A lot of these things are well past their time and need to be changed. And then the arts and the visionary projects. Yeah, Gary?
As we had the opportunity to be in St. George and talk with their parks and rec just a little bit, they get a lot of, a huge amount of income from the hotel. Do we have opportunities like, do we get any, I know that the county gets some for their, for the convention center. Do we have anything come from that from the city?
Not from the city, but that's the grant that you just approved, the County Municipal Recreation Grant. That money comes from the county, the hotels and the tourism tax.
The city in St. George, they get their own.
Oh, yeah.
They have their own.
We get 1%, Jerry.
We get 1%?
Yeah.
But that's just our regular tax though, that goes to the general fund.
Motel tax that goes to the general fund, yeah.
Okay, nothing.
So the grant we get just goes, it comes from the county.
There's
Yes, ma'am.
So with these projects that you've listed, you have 26.67 million, or 26.6 million of unfunded projects. And these are just, this is not all of the projects that you have, or all of the maintenance or different things that you have. What's left off this list, I guess, is what I'm wondering. And then if we do this, how much does that add to the unfunded amount?
Yeah,
That we're gonna be ongoing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we actually went through the master plan, and it's right towards the end. I want to say it's a little after page 107 to like 118. It lists all of the recommendations of everything that should be done in all the existing parks. We went through that, made some master lists, and then we picked out where we felt were the priorities and presented those to the board, and that's how we created this list. But especially on this column here, there's still a whole nother long laundry list of other parks that still have a lot of these same needs. So that's why it doesn't address every single need that's in the system, but it will put us well far ahead from where we could have been if we don't have the tax at all. And then 10 years from now, when we go to renew this tax, there certainly would be a whole lot more list of projects that could be added here. Either new parks at that time or existing that are still in the master plan that we haven't been able to do with what we have available now.
But this RAP tax won't decrease our owning expenses, it will increase for new parks.
Yeah, it will not decrease anything, but it will increase as new parks would come online over time. Gary?
Mark, we have a question here from Larry Walters, who's a member of our council budget.
Yeah.
If the council decided to take a more conservative approach and not bond for a full 12 million, say, so they only were willing, because of uncertainties about the revenue stream, only willing to bond for 6 million, is this list prioritized in a way that they would understand clearly what to cross off?
I would say at this point, there would be some work that would need to be done in order to do that. Again, I mean, this is a working draft. There is some flexibility there. We would need to have, if we're going to 6 million, it would affect it.
Yeah,
But those priorities haven't been established yet.
I mean, this list these are the priorities that have been established.
All are equally important.
They're just consolidated into groups. I think we probably have to reprioritize.
Yeah, we'd have to go back to the Parks and Recreation Board and actually review this whole list with them and have them reprioritize everything. So we have not prioritized them considering that option. We've just prioritized them based on the full tax that would be then bonded for. Yeah, right.
As we review the CIP against this list, it seems like there's several projects that were added to this list that were in the CIP. And I wondered, what was the reasoning for that?
Yeah, this really isn't a CIP list. This is just a project list based on the new funding opportunities involving, the RAP tax, impact fees.
All those funding options that you have over there are also the same funding options you have in the CIP.
It's just a little bit more refined. With our impact fees, we've got updated numbers on that.
Yeah, because on a lot of the projects that are listed on a 5-year CIP, the RAP tax is not really identified as a solid source yet.
Well, like the Rock Canyon Park was one of the ones, I think it's in your parks and trailhead or something like that. So it wasn't necessarily an existing facility. I was just kind of wondering.
Right. And the other thing you need to understand with that comment there too is the fact that when we put the 5-year CIP together, a lot of, because we're spreading things out, a lot of those projects we can actually do in-house. And so there's some cost savings by doing a lot of that work. But when all of a sudden now you start doing all of this all at one time, there's no way we have to do that. We're going to have to contract that out, which is more money. And so that's why some of those numbers might be a little bit different, because this is now incorporating the RAP tax and a lot of projects going on versus what minimal projects we can actually do in a 5-year CIP plan.
Can you go to the construction cost analysis? Okay. So one of the things, so this debt coverage ratio, which is 25%, that's going to add to the bond costs down there in the Waterworks corner as you adjust to these construction costs as well. So I'm wondering if you calculated that in and how that will impact what that bond cost is. Because you're not going to get the whole 10 million up front, you're only going to get about 8.7. So you have $1.8 million that you're going to get along the way. That's also going to, you're going to have to add the cost.
Right,
Construction.
yeah, that would have to be added. This was just based upon the incremental difference between, so if we go no bond, we get 1.26 million a year. I took out the 186,000 just to show the incremental difference. So this number here would actually go up. It would be a worst case. I mean, it would be even more beneficial to bond if we add those in. Does that make sense?
Maybe we just need to talk about it later, but that doesn't.
Okay. And that's we'll have to get with John too and kind of work through a lot of those numbers, but any other questions? I would kind of like to hear some of your thoughts about kind of what we have presented. Are we totally off base? Are we using council on board, or what other additional information might be helpful to you that as we consider where we go next?
Roger, maybe put up your first slide, which has those initial 6 questions. Those were general questions, and any council members could speak in response to your question to any of those high-level questions relative to the taxes general, the timing.
These were the questions that the Parks and Recreation Board addressed and gave those. I think that's a good point. So do you have any questions on any of those?
Or comments.
Well, once again, the board's recommendation was, let's move forward with the RAP tax. Should be placed on November 2015, 2016. They recommend November 2015.
Roger, how close were those votes? Just out of curiosity.
They're all unanimous.
They were unanimous.
They're all
Everything
unanimous.
here was unanimous.
Yes, they're all unanimous. And then, should it be predetermined, kind of like the listing that we're doing now versus the CDBG process? They were totally unanimous that it should be predetermined before the election. And then what the project should be like, how it should break down. So the list we've shown you, those yellow sheets, they were all unanimous on that's how the breakdown should be. They're all unanimous on the projects that were there. And they were all unanimous on that we should bond for it to get it done right up front, so that the people who just voted for it can see all this action happening right away. They can see the value of their money being spent and be real excited by the time you get to the end that they're really ready to approve it again. So those are basically all of their recommendations to the council. Okay.
I like the first four recommendations. I have questions about 5 and 6. Number 5, my question is 4% for arts and 96% for Parks and Rec, is that the right ratio? So that's one question. And then on number 6, in general, I think pay-as-you-go is a kind of a good starting point, and I'm not sure if we're really gonna save all that much on the construction costs if you adjust for inflation, time value, and money and all that. I'm sure there would be some because they've been traditionally going up a little faster than inflation, but it seems like a relatively minor benefit potentially compared to the risk of sort of committing ourselves 10 years in advance to what we're gonna do. Conditions might change and that sort of thing. So that's another question I have at this point.
Okay. And just so you know, we do actually have another meeting, or regular meeting with the Parks and Recreation Board next Thursday. And so a lot of these questions that you bring up, Dave, we can actually address that with them next week. Yeah, Kim.
But even if they could sort of give us a overall kind of preference and order, you know, if they could throw out just at least at first glance, how they would prioritize some of those things, that would be helpful. And I guess my concern is what we've been concerned about for a while is operation and maintenance and being able to maintain what we have and adding a lot to that. And then there's not a great plan for operation and maintenance into the future. We're not that much further ahead, other than we have nice parks and we have more amenities, but I'd like to see a little more planning for the operation and maintenance side of it.
Can we define operation and maintenance, because that's been a stumbling block. If you say operation and maintenance, in my mind, it's all done. If you're talking about when that restroom needs to be replaced
In the future,
that's, I think, where we get a different
I
definition.
think they said it wasn't included, that it would be the construction of the facility, but the operation and maintenance is not included.
Yeah, so to make sure, so when we're talking about like an existing park and replacing restrooms or parking lots or trails or lighting and things of that nature, that's kind of a capital replacement. Whereas the maintenance and operation, we're talking about staffing, fertilizers, utilities, those types of
Is
things.
built into the construction cost.
No, it's
And
not.
that is, it's
That
not
part
built
is not built into the construction costs.
And so that's not built in, and then the capital maintenance is not built into to what you would use the rack tax for.
But Roger,
Yeah.
this is why it needs clarification.
Yeah.
It is built in your operating budget.
Well, not the
For the existing parks, not the new parks.
$400,000.
470,000.
New operating
So
costs.
my point though is if you're going to an existing park and replacing a restroom,
Let's plug sheet.
that's all built in, except for 30 years from now when that restroom needs to be replaced again. But the broken toilet, the painting, the cleaning, all those things, and that to many of us is O&M. And
And that already is
replaced the
existed
restroom
in
in 30 years.
So if any of these new parks that we've listed as potential new parks that would come online during that 10-year period of time, these would be the increased amounts that we are guesstimating at this point as our best guesstimate, since we don't have a lot of specific designs on a lot of these yet, of what would go on, but they don't come on all at once. They come on over that 10-year period of time. At the end of the 10-year period of time, if all of these came on, then yes, you would potentially then have well over $400,000 or $500,000 of new operations and maintenance and staffing, utilities, materials and supplies to now maintain all the new parks.
And how would you, and what would you do with that? How would you account for that?
Well, what we're suggesting is that it would be accounted for the same way it is now out of the general fund. So it's not being proposed as an expenditure of the RAP tax.
That's how you feel
And,
about
and,
my
and the reason
concern.
being is because once you become dependent on it, if all of a sudden that tax goes away, then how do you deal with it at that point in time? So we kind of like to address it more with just the areas that, the new parks you build, you replace the restrooms, the playgrounds and all those things. It's a one-time type thing, whereas these are the ongoing type maintenance things that really should be covered by the general fund. And that was also the recommendation of the Parks and Recreation Board, that that's how it should be looked at.
And so I guess the bottom line is, do you have a recommendation how to increase the general fund?
Well, I look to you to. And how to do that, but,
I think it's important to realize that our conversations about a capital maintenance fund have all been with respect to the future policy. The recommendations we received from our own council budget committee, for example. Whereas you have prepared this in light of current policy, consistent with the way things are done at present. And I think the mayor is referring to that as well. And we ought not to conflate the two. Once we as a council determine what our policy will be with respect to what we call O&M as well as capital maintenance, and future budgets and all that, we would reflect that.
that's right.
But I think that the consideration has to be taken because we're in this situation and we're asking for RAP tax to take care of old projects that we can't maintain now. So I mean, that's causing, so we can't just say, we don't need to worry about, we can't consider taking care of these new parks now because we'll just do it out of general fund. Well, that has not worked in the past. And that's now why we're discussing the RAP tax.
You're still confusing the two terms.
I don't think so.
Because we are maintaining all of our parks.
Right.
So when you say,
So, okay,
But we're
so if
not.
we go back to this,
Yeah, okay, so if you go to this sheet right here, this statement right up over here, that basically, if we replace a new restroom, a playground, resurface the parking lot, or add new lighting, or put more signage or whatever in the park, that basically does not really change our staffing needs. It doesn't change, we need more fertilizer or utilities and things. In a lot of cases, it may even help us because we're gonna have more efficient type materials than maybe what we'd have before, or energy efficient type things. And so in reality, when we replace those, we're really saying that there is no additional operation and maintenance cost. Where the operation and maintenance costs come in is when you build all the new stuff, because that doesn't exist today. And as a result, that's where there would need to be that extra O&M.
So how long have these needs been, this list of needs, how long have you had this list of needs? I mean, and, you know, how long is it taking to get them done? And when we're looking at a RAP tax, to take care of this list of needs from the past.
They've been there for a long time.
For a long
and
time.
that's where the RAP tax would really address a lot of these needs that we don't really have any other funding source right now in order to really make that happen. And the RAP tax can do that, and many other communities are using that for that exact purpose now.
So we haven't been keeping up, because we do have needs we're not able to meet, and we're looking for a RAP tax to meet those needs. And so I guess moving into the future, I feel like it's better to calculate what those needs are going to be and help and plan for those, start planning for those as well.
Yeah. So we're maintaining them,
Right.
but we're not replacing them.
Well,
So
if
to me, there's a difference between maintaining and replacing.
I think that's what this, I think it's
They're replacing the
confused,
bathroom
but I think
or
that
replacing-
the public
No, no,
confuses it too.
no, this is very clear. Maintenance is not replacing the bathroom. His long list those are capital expenses, not maintenance expenses. So when you say we're not maintaining them, what you're saying is those guys that are out there mowing and trimming and fertilizing are not doing that. And that's almost offensive because they're doing that so well. When you say we're not budgeting for capital, that is correct. And that's the delineation I'm trying to get you to make. Bringing them up in one sentence as if they're the same.
And I'm not, but I'm saying if we have an existing facility with the bathroom, there's a certain point in time when that bathroom wears out, needs to be replaced.
Capital expense.
And we don't have money to do that.
Capital expense.
So we need a RAP tax to do that.
Yes.
I mean, that's a very
That
simplified
RAP tax
version.
could be
Okay,
used to do that.
but now we're gonna spend, I don't know how much, another amount, these proposed new parks and expansions to make new parks, new facilities, which are gonna have a bathroom. And they're gonna have some other things. I'm not talking about cutting the grass, fertilizing the lawn, but those amenities are gonna have to be replaced at a certain point too.
And I'm good with all that, but just use the term capital expense, not maintenance.
Okay, whatever, but I think the need is still real, that we're gonna put new facilities in that need to be replaced with capital expense that we don't have funding for. And so we'll have the same need at some point in time when we're creating the same problem that we're solving for the future, it seems
Okay,
like to me.
that's the real benefit of this RAP tax is because every 10 years, it can be presented again to the voters to be voted upon for a new source of revenue again.
Then you
To
have a bunch of
replace-
new parks then to sell it.
But if you have to spend it on new parks, then.
Right, you have to-
Once again, but remember, if you look at that list, the majority of the money that's being used for new parks is really the
Impact
fee
fees.
monies. Yeah, most of the money that you notice there is actually going for these capital.
Can an
place
impact,
ones.
can those impact fees be used to build a new bathroom in the existing park?
No. The only way it could is if there's been a substantial amount of new development around that park that's created more pressure because of the new growth.
And for example, there's a Lakeview Park by the school, where there's gonna be a lot of new homes, that could be used to do that one, right?
Possibly, but if you notice, Lakeview is not on our list because it's a fairly new park.
Right, but
But yeah, that
I'm
same
saying out in the
scenario
future.
could happen. But in most cases, then you have to justify, which is quite an extensive, project to do that. So that's why it's almost better that you take something that's existing and you find some other source of revenue, resource of revenue to do that, and you use the impact fees for all the new growth related things, then it's much cleaner that way. Yeah.
Do we have enough new growth and enough money and impact fees from new growth to do that?
Yes.
In the west side?
Yeah, we're projecting about 900,000 at the end of March, about March 12th of this year, in the current fiscal year 2015, we're at $840,000 that we've collected already. And in talking to Skip Tandy with new projects coming online, he's anticipating by the end of June, we could be at 1.2 million just this year in park impact fees. Now, once again, they go up and down, and there are years where it was lower, but we kind of felt looking at all the new projected development that's going to occur out west, and even downtown with a lot of these different things that over the period of time, we could generate $9 million. And that's what we're projecting.
But then that has to be spent downtown and on the west side, right? That is not gonna help Stubbs Park or Foothill Park or,
Yes, yeah, it would affect all of those because the park impact fee area is the entire city limits.
Oh, it is.
It's
So you
not
can use
certain
it-
neighborhoods, you can
Okay.
use anywhere in the entire city limits.
Okay.
And so that's why that's a good funding source for all these new park lists that are right here, because that's where you can really use that. Now, if you use RAP tax, you can use RAP tax on that, but then again, you can't use RAP tax, you can't use park impact fees to develop all the existing problems. So that's why you gotta use the two in combination together. For the new parks, you use the park impact fees, the RAP tax, you use it for the existing facilities to upgrade them and improve them.
Can I make an observation here? And I haven't added those up, but Roger said it's roughly 400,000, so.
Yeah, and there's a couple of here that we still don't know yet because we don't know what it's gonna
For
be.
the sake of this discussion, say that it's 400,000. It sounds overwhelming. It's actually 5% of the current parks budget. So if all of them came online today, it would require a 5% increase in their budget. And I bring it up that way because it's not unreasonable that over the period of time that it would take to build these, that their budget would increase by that amount anyway because of increased revenue coming into the general fund. So it's not like, I think it's important to keep that perspective.
But to follow up on it, then how come that hasn't worked in the past?
It's exactly how. So you go to Lakeview Park, how did we, that's a brand new park, how did we fund the maintenance of that?
Yeah, and then like I said, Doug used the example of the splash pad at Pioneer Park. When that went on, that was quite an impact, just one little element that you put in an existing park. And that increase was about, $27,000 that we had to actually have for the maintenance and operation of that one item in a park. So we have gotten additional monies throughout the years to actually increase that maintenance and operation account. But the point we'd like to make, at least with the new point parks, is that they don't come on all at one time. And so even though it may be 400,000, year one, it might be only 40, year two, it might be another 57. So it's kind of incrementally, and then eventually after the full 10 years, then you have that full amount.
I think the way I'm looking at it is, and this is a little bit in conflict with what Mr. Miller said, but this is actually, in my mind, exactly in harmony with what the budget committee has asked for, because it puts forth a plan for capital improvements in our parks going forward. And I think that's what I've heard, the frustration that we haven't had This is the plan to do that.
I guess that's not what I got from the presentation.
Okay,
I
so what did
didn't
you get from the
understand that there was
presentation?
capital improvement money built into this presentation. I understood the opposite. I don't know.
Just take your words, I'm just trying to understand, Mayor. This plan builds it in, then your statement just 2 times ago said it's built in because 400,000 is only 5%, it can easily be.
Maintenance.
So, I mean, I think the issue here is, and that's why the mayor's been trying to clarify the difference between those two terms, is the policy in the past has been to build operating costs, but not capital improvements, which includes replacing existing facilities into the budget. Like, what I sense both Kay and Kim trying to say is that they think that ought to be also built into the budget. That that capital improvements.
That's probably
Not
right.
replacement of the whole facility, but replacement of
Replacement of
bathrooms and
things that need
replacement
to
of,
be replaced.
yeah,
over
these things
time.
that are
And
listed
that's
here.
my point, is that's what Roger's presenting.
With the RAP tax, over time, it'll
With the
replace
RAP
the new.
tax.
It would replace those. And
Over
so,
10 years.
so rather than impacting the general fund, where you could use that money for maybe other things, this is a way that we can accomplish that without having to use general fund money.
For the existing, but not for the new.
Yeah, it'll be for the existing.
For the existing, but then the new parks
The
that
new
we're in the
is
same
part-
boat, trying to figure out how we're gonna
Well,
have capital.
That-
needs
That's
for the
park
new
impact
ones.
fees.
So-
That will cover those.
Let me ask this clarifying question, Roger. So does the RAP tax include replacement of the new bathrooms at the new parks down the road?
If I can answer, the answer is no, because
But
the
it
RAP
could.
tax is 10 years, and the life of those as far exceeds 10
Many
years.
of them are 20-year lifespan, and some of them
Right,
30
so-
years.
So the point that's being made is you've said, and I think that, I get, so Roger's saying we're not building operating costs into the RAP tax because if it goes away, we don't want to be reliant on it. I think Kay and Kim's point is, but you will be reliant on the RAP tax for the replacement capital costs of the new capital improvements.
And I think my response to that is if you don't include those in the RAP tax, you don't get the RAP tax.
That's why it's nice to have a combination of existing trails, parks, new parks, arts, visionary projects. You do a little bit of everything. And I realize you don't have that real specific list, but if you look at that yellow list that you've got there, it covers almost every single neighborhood in the entire city. And that's what's really nice about this, is that every neighborhood will notice an improvement, either a new park or an improvement to an existing park or trail.
But when you sell the RAP tax, these aren't included in the RAP tax, right? These are impact.
No,
So
those
when
are
you
not
go out and
included.
sell it, the mayor just said we have to use those to sell the RAP tax, but that's not even included in the RAP.
So that's why it's the way it's presented to you too. It's a package. This is how we deliver this package.
So when you go out and sell the RAP tax, you'd say, here's the package for the next 10 years.
Exactly.
Can we? That's just me, probably. I just don't like that. We need to go sell this. This sounds so.
Yeah, but Kay, we sold the water rate increases. We sold the
know.
utility transportation fund.
I know.
I mean, that's our job.
And maybe it's to
That's
educate.
probably true.
Yeah, I like the term educate, okay? I like the term educate, because a lot of times people don't want to vote. If they don't know what it's really about, they won't vote. But if they have an educational amount of knowing exactly what's going to happen, then they're more willing to vote yes.
And I think the selling process needs to be represented on both sides. Most of the time, our selling process, I think it. Anyway, that's just my.
And that's why the selling process will occur in 2 different avenues. We'll have this grassroots committee that would actually be out there kind of really promoting this, saying, vote yes for this, and this is why. And then the city will also be educating with the general information in addition to what the grassroots group does. And by the 2, hopefully you will contact every voter that will at least be able to have the information they need to make the right decision when they go to the polls.
And
So
there
if
will
someone
likely,
asks me, oh, go ahead.
there will likely be grassroots organizations urging people to vote no. Happened with the rec center bond, it will happen as a matter of course. So if there are no grassroots groups doing anything, then all the city can do is present neutral information, which is if the vote is approved, this is what the city council has said will happen with the money. and this is where it comes from. This is how it will affect a typical home, typical family. But we have to stay totally neutral in whatever we use taxpayer dollars to educate with.
And I personally have a problem saying that, oh, the raft tax will build these new parks, because that's not, I mean, I don't want to choose my words carefully. I don't want to tell them something that's not true. For me, that's a problem. I want to say the raft tax will take care of the ongoing, I want to tell them what it's going to do, and I don't want to choose my words carefully and say, oh, the total package will pay for, I don't know, that's just a little uncomfortable.
Yeah, if you're looking at the list, and we'll get you that breakdown of the real long list, we'll email that to you. But the majority of the RAP tax goes to replace existing type things.
Which
capital.
is great.
And it's a park impact fees, it's
Yeah,
really
so
together, but when you
Which is
pull them
great.
all together, you can really leverage all of them together to really do a whole lot of work together.
And
And let's tell them that.
yeah.
That's what
Let's
With
say
the,
that.
I apologize if there's any confusion there. Like you said, the ultra majority of the RAP tax is for existing upkeep and, replacement of the existing facilities. The impact fees are doing what they're supposed to do. They're building the new parks. And I apologize for,
In that statement, just a little bit, impact fees can be used to add to additional facilities, can't they?
But only if you can prove that there's a direct nexus between development that paid the impact fees and the need for the repairs to the existing
But
facility.
is that proof so hard that we just don't want to try to do that, so we're just not going to do
It's
that?
very, very difficult to try to do that, and if for some reason we found that we didn't do it right, we've spent money there, then we're required to go back and reimburse that fund. And so it's almost better to stay away from it unless you can, it's really obvious that you can really, there's been a total new development around something that can justify putting a new restroom or playground in an existing park. So that's why we really just kind of look at either land acquisition or developing brand new parks.
Okay, from my perspective, it's not really that hard to make the argument, but it's not enough to make the argument. You actually have to include it in your impact fee study. So you've actually got to go out and reconstruct your impact fee study and have those maintenance costs included in and studied as part of your study, which, I don't know how complicated that is because I haven't done one, but I think that's what Roger's saying, is that it's not a matter of just saying, we know that they're tied together. We have to go through the process of paying for the study to show they're tied together.
So the thought, what if part of the money from the RAP goes for existing, replacement issues, these things that are listed, and part of the money is slated. I guess the new facilities won't need some of that stuff in the next 10 years. Do you project that they will need that in the next 10 years? Or when do you start to have some of these capital maintenance needs for the new facilities?
Well, depending on, most of these will, like when we look at restrooms and playgrounds or trail system, lighting system, most of them will last about 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so probably they wouldn't almost even be in the next cycle, it'd be almost the third cycle.
They need to be built into the third cycle.
Yeah, maybe at the third cycle, we might be getting to that point. And like I say, the second cycle that we're looking at, as I mentioned, there's still a lot of items that are addressed in the master plan that we had to kind of take off the list because there's just too many. And we prioritized the ones that we felt were the higher priorities. And the second go around will still address a lot of existing needs, but hopefully we can get to that point.
And it'd be nice to see a 20-year projection, to see in aggregate what those capital maintenance needs are going to be at that point. And by building these new facilities, are we going to be able to manage those without, like you say, a large draw from the general fund?
And that's why we feel pretty confident that the ones that are on this list now are the priority items that we really need to address in that 10-year period of time. And that's why the board recommended the bond, because really a lot of those needs almost can't wait 10 years. They really should be done right away as soon as it's passed, that the bond would allow us to do a lot of these within the first couple of years. And then they'd all be replaced. And so that's why they're really recommending that we bond, so we can do a whole lot right up front, and these needs can be addressed immediately.
I just want to jump back to what we were talking about a few minutes ago. You were talking about impact fees being used primarily for new parks.
Correct.
And the new parks total is about $15 or $16 million, but the impact fees are $9.3 million. Do you have an accounting of where that other $7 million is supposed to come from? So in here, the new parks is 16.7, and your impact fees is 9.3. And so where's that other $7 million going to go to pay for those parks?
So, okay. In the no bond option, some of the RAP tax would go to new construction. There's a combination. The majority of the fee to construct the park would come from the park impact fee. In the bonding option, the fee to build a new park would come from impact fees.
Well, but even in the bonding option, you have a $6 million difference.
And then we also have county grant money, and we also have CDBG.
And do those need to be
money.
spent on
That
their
are
projects? I mean, is there like a limitation on what those funds can be spent to?
Yeah. Certainly for CBG, it has to be in certain areas, and so like Foothill Park that was on there is actually in the CBG area. So that one can be used, and that's
That was 2.3 million. That could all be CDBG funding.
Are there existing projects that, like the existing upgrades, that some of those funds could be spent on instead of putting towards new projects?
So I think the concern of the
that's how
council
we've been
is,
looking at.
let's only use, for the new parks, okay, we have to do impact fees for the new parks. Well, then let's only use that amount
At
of money.
$9.3 million for new
And
parks.
everything else that we get from every other funding source used to either maintain, to not build more parks that we can't even maintain, right, with our current standing. And so the question is, why is there that $7 million difference?
So time out, you cannot say that.
So capital maintenance.
All right.
Capital facility upgrades.
Well, that's why we try to use all of these revenue sources, and we've identified which ones we can use, the CDBGs, which ones we can use the county grant, which ones we can use impact fees, which ones we can use RAP tax. And if you notice, the bottom lines all balance out. And so we've tried to make sure that we don't use CDBG to build Stutz Park, for example.
Ryan, can't you
So we've got
finish
them
your
all
comment?
programmed out so that can happen.
Right,
The
so
argument's still
capital
there.
maintenance, the argument's still there, there's $7 million in this right here, or in the no bond option, there's $6 million that we're using for new parks, when we can't even keep the capital maintenance up of the current parks that we have.
Well, Ryan, I guess the
So
bottom
why
line
can't
is
we do
you
that $7 million?
have a recommendation
for
from
that?
the administration of the Parks and Rec Board. You don't have to adopt it. You play with this list all you want to, and you craft what you think the voters will buy. And at the end of the day, we'll see what happens. But, again, this question of why you decided to do what you did, we tried to explain that. We may or may not agree with what the council ends up doing. But we've put an issue on the table, and so has the Parks and Rec Board, your advisory board unanimously. You do with it what you want. At the end of the day.
No.
But the good thing is when you use all those revenue sources, it does all balance out, and you can get all of that stuff done in a 10-year period of time, which is more than we've ever done in a long period of time. And it does address the existing needs that you've had concerns about of how do we deal with replacement of existing stuff that we just don't have any other funding source to do. It solves all of those problems. So it's really, in my opinion, a no-brainer to do this thing and to move forward. And certainly as your director of Parks and Recreation, I would highly recommend that you seriously consider moving forward with the RAP tax. And certainly we can tweak all of this thing. We've done the best we can, working with the Parks and Recreation Board to come up with what we think is a good proposal. But we certainly are welcome to all your input and suggestions on how this can even look better before we take it to the voters.
Thank you, Roger. We appreciate your presentation. Very informative.
Thank you for your comments, and we'll follow up on those questions. Like I mentioned, we do meet with Parks and Recreation Board again next Thursday. We'll address those and then go back to you on that. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I've been told that, John, you have a figure on the bond.
I think
they adequately covered it, so.
Our next item is related to the citywide fleet facility fund, as is presented in the mayor's proposed budget. And who's making that presentation?
John Morgan will be doing the first part, which is the financing, and then Dave Decker will be here for the part two, which is the what's in the facility.
Okay, I think most of you have had an opportunity to go over and visit the fleet facility. And it has been a big issue for administration. It's been on our high priority list for several years, and we just haven't been able to fund it. And so one of the tasks that we had, and then the mayor challenged us to come up with in this upcoming budget, was to see if there's a way we could come up with a reasonable plan to provide funding for the fleet facilities. And so that's what we've done, and I kind of want to walk through it with you, and then I'll be happy to answer questions. So, do you want me to drive? I can do that. It's working? Perfect. So, originally, the fleet facility price tag was about $6 million. And Dave Decker and his team, and he'll elaborate a little more on this, went in and sharpened their pencils, and we came up with a concept of having a phase 1 and a phase 2 on the project. And so what we're proposing in this budget is phase 1, which would be $4 million, okay? And as we kind of debated and looked about and thought about ways to fund, we had talked about bonding, but there's a couple of challenges with the bonding option. Number one, with bonding, you have certain set fees, regardless of any size of bond that you issue, you're gonna have fees that you're gonna incur. You also need to have a revenue source that's designated so that when the bondholders buy the bonds, that they are secure that there's gonna be a revenue source going forward. And one of the reasons that we kind of struggled with how to pay for the fleet facility is that we really don't have a revenue source that comes in, because it's a facility for the internal uses of the city. And so as we kind of pondered over, thought, well, probably doesn't warrant a bond based on the size and the fees that would be involved, and the interest and the long-term funding source. And so kind of put the bonding option on the side and said, is there a way that we can just pull this off in a couple of years? Okay. And so what we looked at, it's still working, like it's stopped. Probably. I probably
Or ran out of batteries.
Wonder, oh, maybe I'm hitting the wrong.
The arrow?
It's not working. Does anybody else have a way you can just?
Let's get some more.
We're now on the next screen. So, by the way, I just realized there's an error, so I apologize for this. This should be 250,000 right here.
I think if you stand on this side, you can control it.
Okay, we'll try this side. Okay. So the proposal is we know it's primarily for the vehicles that are used throughout the city. And as I've met with Travis and met with Dave Decker, it's pretty close to, if you took the vehicles and broke them out, it's pretty close to about 50% of the vehicles are used by the general fund, 50% are used by the enterprise funds. And so the current proposal is that the funding would come half from the general fund, half from the enterprise funds. And then what we've included, and I apologize for this should be 250. We're proposing to use out of general fund balance in this year, $1.5 million, and then $250,000 in the 2016 budget, which we've included, and then in the following budget, 2017, we would budget $250,000, and that would provide the $2 million of funding from the general fund. Then in the enterprise funds, as they looked at and evaluated it, they would budget for about $1.3 million in this 2016 budget. And I'll show you in a subsequent slide, Energy proposing to pay for all of theirs in the current year, and Public Works in half and half, and then $690 in the 2017 budget. We talk about general fund and fund balance. We went in and we made a projection on what our fund balance, our unassigned general fund balance is. In our audited financial statement, we had at the end of last year $8,338,392. As we've looked at the revenues, and right now, we're in May. We've only got one more month to go in this fiscal year. We project primarily from sales tax and some other sources, that our revenues are going to exceed expenses by about $1.3 million. We also had, we sold the South Fork lots, and as part of that process, we originally put 1.5 million in escrow last year. And because that money was restricted, it was not included in fund balance. But not only did we get the 500,000, but we were able to get an additional 267,000 from the sale of those lots. So that brings in about $767,000 from the sale of lots that would go back into unassigned fund balance. And assuming that we were to go ahead and fund the fleet facility appropriation, that would drop us by about $1.5 million. And so what that would give us projected for the end of the year would be an increase in fund balance over and above the 1.5 of about 485,000. So our fund balance would actually go up to 8.8 million projecting to the end of 2015. I would mention a couple things. First of all, one of the things that we've talked to the municipal council about in the past is a desire to increase our fund balance. The state increased the limit to 25%. It used to be 18. And we were really hoping to work towards building that. And this year would have been a great year as far as making progress towards getting to the 25%. We were about 18% at the end of the last year. This would get us almost to 19 if we did the fleet facility. I am someone that really advocates building fund balance and would love to see that happen. But I know the fleet facility is a real need, and it's something that that I really feel like is a high priority. And so in this situation, I personally recommend that we go ahead and build the fleet facility, and I think this is a good approach to doing that. And so it's a significant amount of money, but I think it's the fair thing to do. The other thing that I would state is that in years past, or there's been times when we just went to the enterprise funds to try to provide funding for things like this, but I don't think that's the right thing to do. And we've really tried to be fair and equitable on what would be the fair portion to the enterprise funds, to the general fund, and so that's what we've done here. This just kind of shows Public Works, how they would provide the funding. And this shows that in fiscal 2016, each of these funds would pick up their proportionate shares, as well as 2017. I'd also mention that when Dave Decker came in and did his rate proposals for the Public Works funds, for their enterprise funds, they included these amounts in their rates, okay, for the fleet facility. And energy, as I mentioned, their portion is $620,000, and that is to be funded out of the 2016 budget, which what Dave Decker proposed. Public Works has,
assuming that is reflected in their rate.
It is. It is. And the reason that Public Works is higher than energy is they have more vehicles. And so once again, our attempt has been to charge fairly where those that are receiving the benefits from the vehicles. And both, I would also mention that both Dave Decker and Energy and Dave and Travis are very supportive and that they understand the needs for this. And so that is the recommended funding source for that. And I would love to have Dave Decker will kind of walk through some of the operational issues and the reasons for the fleet facility. But if there's any questions about the funding approach, I would be happy to answer those. Yes.
Just on that funding approach, how much will the general fund benefit from the increases?
As far as having the fleet facility?
As far as the increases in the rates that we're going to be charging to cover the fleet facility. Because we're going to have to increase our rates.
Oh, as far as what the transfer would be
yes.
related to that?
Just
I'd have to go back and do the calculation. I'm not sure. We looked at and determined what it was for their total rate increase, but to identify what that portion would be just specifically for the fleet facility.
What was it for the total rate? Was it not? Was it?
Remember? I think it was like around seems to me like it was around 900,000, but
That's what I,
we'll look it up here. We can get it for you. I think it was like 784,000 or something. But Jimmy did that for us.
okay, thank you.
Any other questions on the funding approach?
I have a question.
Right.
So I have $2 million is coming out of the enterprise funds.
Yes.
When we raise rates to cover this, 11% goes to the general fund, 1% goes to roads, so 10% goes to the general fund. So of that $2 million, essentially 200,000 is going to the general fund. Would it be fair to say that we're really funding 2.2 million of it out of the rate increases and 1.8 million of it out of the general fund? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, because whenever they do increase the rates, it does increase the transfer.
So it's really like the how much it's affecting the general fund is lessened because of that.
Yeah.
Transfer.
I would just say that our intent when we went back and determined how much the enterprise funds were going to pay and how much the general fund was going to pay was truly on use and on a fair distribution, but I think that could also be stated.
John, aren't we taking some of the sanitation dollars out of fund balance?
Yes, I think the plan was they were taking out a fund balance.
So there's no, transfers already been paid on those, so there's no transfer.
That's true.
Would come out of that.
Yeah, because their rate's not going to be adjusted
Right,
accordingly.
so
That's
it's not
fair.
all of it's coming out of next year's revenue.
That's true. Yep. Any other questions on funding? Okay, Dave.
I hesitate to stand up after Tuesday's presentation. I'm kind of wondering, they probably had enough of me. We're going to go ahead and do just a quick presentation. This is a shorter topic, thank heavens, than Tuesday's discussion. And I think most of the council members have most of the council members have had a visit to our fleet facility down in Public Works. If you haven't, Mrs. Hales, I think you were one that might have missed the tours we did. We did just a couple of pictures here, and I want to take just a minute to kind of show the pictures. You're going to recognize the facility, and then we'll go into some of the details as far as the building itself and what's being proposed. So this is the south face of the building. So this is kind of interior to the Public Works yard. There's 4 openings. You can see the 4 different bays that go into the fleet facility. The next slide shows the other side, the north face of it. Just general idea about the building itself. We had an architect come in and a structural engineer come in and do some evaluations. This was about a year and a half ago that we did this. And the best they could tell, they're telling us that the building may have been used as a military building first and then moved to Provo City to Public Works. It was originally constructed in the early 1950s in Provo. So it's got a pretty long life just in Provo. They're not 100% sure as far as its previous use, but it did not appear to, at least the structural engineer did not feel like it was the original location for the building. He said that there were several elements in the roof structure that had been removed. He wasn't sure if that was removed after it was put here or if it was just not installed when the building was moved, if it was moved to Provo City. But it's got a long life. It's had a long life here in Provo. Next couple of slides show the inside of the building. One of the main concerns that I have with the building is the height issue. Obviously, since 1950, our vehicles have changed a lot, and height is one of the key elements. You can see, and this was just taken this morning, these are our sanitation vehicles, and any vehicle that has to lift up, like a 10-wheel dump truck or bobtail, sanitation, some of our vehicles, all but 4 of them, have to have a bed that lifts up in order to get the garbage out. And sometimes those hydraulic systems have to be worked on. If they do, we can't work on them inside. And so we have about, just to give you a little perspective, we have about 30 10-wheel and bobtail dump trucks that come from various departments, energy, parks, public works. We all have dump truck type vehicles. We have 6 fire engines that have lift or cabs that go up that are too high for inside the building. So Dan Snyder, who's our head mechanic for fire, he works out on the north side. If you've ever driven by this building, he's working on a fire truck on the north side of the building. It's because he has no option to work inside on that piece of equipment. And he's oftentimes, it doesn't matter winter or summertime, he's out working on the vehicle outside. We also have, we can go to, I think, one of our next, this is another perspective. You can see as far as the roof structure, we just simply cannot lift them up. But I think the next picture shows, this is one of our 10-wheel dump trucks. And I don't know if you can tell by the angle of the bed right here, but this bed is not even halfway up. And you can see how it approaches the ceiling right there. And so if they're working on those hydraulic systems, we're having to brace them because we can't put them all the way up in order to work. And so there's some safety issues for the mechanics that we're trying to address, but at the same time, the building really, is a major issue here. The next one shows one other piece of equipment. This is one of our track hose. The track hoe arm can be extended in it. Obviously, it's a long piece of equipment, and as long as you're working with the arm flat, you're fine. But as far as reaching up, obviously the track hose is going to hit the ceiling also on the arm wheel. Just a couple of other things. None of this is really great news. This is a safety device on one of our lifts where the equipment is not supposed to go higher than that bar. The problem is our light in the building right there is below the bar. So if the equipment goes to the bar, we're going to hit the light with that. That's just one of the safety issues that the building presents. As far as our fuel, or our liquid storage in the fleet building, I think we do a pretty good job given the challenges that we have. But as far as current standards, we've got a couple of violations that you can see here. Let's keep going, Jimmy. This is just an example. This is a plumbing pipe going out right here. That's a hole right through the outside wall. Installation in the top of the building. Let's just keep going. This is a leak. This was taken on the day that it was raining last week, and water's coming in right here. This is a 220 volt electrical socket right there, right below. Let's just keep going. None of this is, like I say, good news. This is our vent system.
You need to throw in a picture of the right center once in a while.
At least you're laughing. I'm glad that this is our warehouse, our inventory. Let's keep going, Jimmy. So let's shift gears just a little bit here. This is our public works facility from an air photo, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the master plan here. We're primarily concerned about, we're going to talk about this building and also this building right there. That's our current fleet building right there. We're kind of in the middle. The far left-hand side of that building is the offices. Most of our people have offices in that main building. And then we have a small building right here. This little building right here is where sanitation parks, and they wash their trucks there. We can put 4 sanitation vehicles in there overnight, but that's all. All the rest of the sanitation vehicles are out, parked outside. Fleet occupies the next kind of half of the building up until those offices right there, this office extension right here. And then from that point on, street stores part of their 10-wheel dump trucks and their bobtails in that building. But we also, in fact, you can tell in this photo right here, we don't have enough room in that building even for all the vehicles there. And we'll talk just a little bit about, particularly about sanitation. So about a year and a half ago, we brought in an architecture firm, as I mentioned, and had some engineering with it. We did a full master plan. This is kind of the results of the master plan, just in the public works yard, and some of the recommendations that they provided to us. They recommended that we build a new fleet building. Our existing water warehouse kind of sits out in the middle of the yard of Public Works. There's really nothing around it. And they recommended that we build a new building running due east from that location, and then rehab that building. They said if we can rehab the building and use it for vehicle storage, it's probably a good idea, because we do have a number of vehicles that are sitting out in the sun. It's hard on the vehicles to be out there. It's probably not the ideal circumstance. But they said, as far as the actual building itself, it probably has 10 years left. I mean, as long as we don't have an earthquake, it probably will stay up. But as far as vehicle storage, it's probably all right. It keeps them out of the sun, things like that. But as far as people working in the building, we've got some problems with that. And that's where they said you can't have people working in that building anymore. There's a number of other elements that came out in the master plan. We're going to talk about this. This is some covered parking. This is that was recommended in the master plan, and this is just kind of a V-shaped covered parking. It's not enclosed. It's just got a roof structure. It's pretty basic covered parking, and they recommended that we consider that for either sanitation and/or streets departments to get some of the vehicles out of the sun. They also put some bulk storage back here on the very eastern boundary of Public Works. And one of the things that is under construction right now is our salt facility, new covered salt storage area. And the footings have been poured on that building. The block will start to go up on it relatively quickly here. That was funded last year in the budget. In fact, this current fiscal year. Let's keep going. So we're going to focus for just a second here, right on, this is, again, the existing water warehouse and what they had proposed running east of that in the master plan. One of the things that you'll note, and this is a little scaled version of it, one of the things that you'll note is right here, we wanted to combine our water warehouse with our existing warehouse in the fleet building. Right now, they're in two separate buildings, and there's one employee in both buildings, but if one's on vacation or one gets sick or something like that, there's really nobody to cover that operation. And so one of the things that one of the driving forces that kind of said, let's use that warehouse, is to combine that operation so that we can put all our inventory into one location. We've got two employees, so if one of them's sick or one needs to go on vacation, we've got some coverage there. So there is a little bit of a benefit there as far as combining that operation. We would have, from that point over, we would have, we're proposing 12 bays, 6, when I say 12 bays, they're like that, okay, so that they would be double wide to be able to pull in a vehicle on both sides of the building. It would be long, and it would be deep enough that you can have two vehicles end to end on it. So one mechanic could be working on 2 vehicles in the same bay. And right now we have vehicle storage equivalent for about 8, so we would be going to 12 bays. So it is an expansion of the existing building, but obviously we're trying to look ahead also for the growth of the city. This is a building that we're anticipating that's going to be around for a long time, and we want to make sure that we're getting enough buildings so that we don't have to expand it in the near future. One of the other things, Jimmy, do we have any other slides beyond this? Okay, the funding thing. One of the other things that I was going to mention, and we've been working very closely with the architect lately. There's another item, and it was mentioned, the covered parking for sanitation was funded in the current fiscal year, the 15 fiscal year. The council and the administration supported $350,000 for covered parking sanitation vehicles. I mentioned that 4 of them can be inside a building right now, but all the other sanitation vehicles have to be outside, just parked outside. One of the things that came out of the master plan, in the previous slide, I showed you where just some basic covered parking was shown. It's right over here. Just basic covered parking was first identified right there. And as we started thinking a little bit with the architect, we started saying, is there a reason that we ought to think about combining our sanitation covered parking with our fleet building? Part of the reason that we started down that road, this office space right here, this is where our streets and our fleet and our sanitation offices sit. And they were recommending we take those offices down. Right now, this is an add-on to the building. If you go and look at it, you can tell it's definitely a later add-on. But the roof is gone on it. There's a lot of repair that needs to be done on that building. And so the architect said, it's beyond repair. Just plan to tear those offices down. You're not going to be able to save them. So the question became, for sanitation offices, where do they end up going? And you know, what's the best process as far as finding new office space? And that kind of drove the question about, do we do covered parking? Originally, it was thought to be here. Somebody later on came up with the idea, do we put it right here? And then the architect came back and said, why don't you consider an L-shaped building or a T-shaped building and put some covered parking in this direction and do combined office space at this end of the building. The inventory would still stay there. We want to combine that. But we do want to take advantage of some combined office space so that we're not running separate utilities for offices, you know, over here in this location. So we're trying to be smart about how we put the money together as far as combining the building. So right now, that's kind of where we're at with the architect. He's laying out a couple of options as far as combining the buildings versus separating right here. He's doing some cost estimates for us, and we should see those back fairly quickly. As far as future plans with the architect, we are right now, if the council and the administration supports the budget as John has explained it, we would fund this over 2 fiscal years, and there's a number of advantages to that. But as far as construction, we would start next spring. We would design during the winter time, the coming fall and winter, and we would plan on starting March of 2016, so that the first fiscal year money would allow the project to start, and then we would the construction would probably go about 6 to 8 months on the building, and so we would lapse over July 1st and have the second fiscal year money available to finish the project. We would probably have to award the project initially by schedule, so that we're not committing ourselves necessarily or unnecessarily for the second fiscal year until it was approved. Well, you can always go back and award a second schedule once that budget was approved. So that's kind of the plan right now for the fleet building.
Could you talk about the phase 1 and phase 2?
Yeah, the phase 1, and a lot of this is shown right here, but in fact, Jimmy, let's go back to this plan right here. This is what came out of the master plan, as I indicated, and this is really both phase 1 and phase 2 all combined together. There's a number of improvements that are shown, and they're not part of phase 1. So we're talking about improving the boundary of the public works. It's probably some kind of a nicer rail fence, something that's a little bit more attractive. I don't know if you've driven by that facility, but it's just kind of chain link, and it's coming down and it doesn't look very good. Some landscaping to make it look a little bit nicer. There's a couple of other buildings here. One of them is a wash bay, and that would be for, and it's not an automated wash, by the way, but it would allow our employees to wash their vehicles instead of using an automated system, which we're paying for right now. Would be able to wash them here at the fleet building. Also, the second phase of the project would take the administration, or excuse me, the existing, that red building right there, the existing water garage, and it would allow an expansion of the office space. We're kind of pushing up against our office space in the administration building. So in the second phase, which I think would largely be Public Works' responsibility to do as far as a funding source, that would be part of the second phase. And it's in my mind, it's still many years down the road. It's several years down the road before we would have to start those kind of considerations. So we've tried to be very careful about the plan here as far as offices, making sure that we have the offices back kind of that L-shaped idea of putting offices where those two wings would come together.
Dave, when do your financial numbers crystallize a bit more, when the estimates come back and the ebb and flow of the project?
We feel like right now we've had enough cost estimates given to us that we feel very confident with the $4 million that we've given to the fleet building. We feel that if you kind of drive by there now, most of this is dirt. We can get most of the site improvements around the immediate area of the building. We're probably not going to come out and do a lot of this stuff on the perimeter, but these improvements in the building right in this area can be done with the cost estimate that we've been given. Any other questions?
I think they're all just still thinking about the rat tax.
As long as they're still not thinking about Tuesday, while I was here before, so.
That's still there.
It's not gone yet. I was gonna maybe bring a box of tomatoes with me and just put them on the table. If you want something to throw at me, I brought my own ammunition, so.
I guess, Dave, one of the things we always talked about before is outsourcing still, and we're still quite confident that we need to maintain this for our own vehicles and not try to outsource it, and also possible insourcing some opportunities for that. Are we still looking at those, or
Let me give you a couple of thoughts on that. And Dan Snyder that I mentioned before, he's probably the first example that I will turn to. Dan Snyder works on, he has certifications and he works on most of our fire equipment. He happens to be one of the few mechanics in the area that has that certification. We have Orem City bringing their fire vehicles to Provo to be worked on. We are charging them, and we're charging them a little bit extra above and beyond what we normally would charge our own departments. But we have Orem, and I think we've got, is it 2 other cities that bring fire equipment?
It's UU, Orem, and Santa Fe.
and Warren just did their own, a new fleet facility.
They do. They have a relatively new facility, but what they don't have is a person to be able to work on it. And so as far as outsourcing that kind of work, we really don't have much option. I mean, people are coming to us, to do their fire equipment. If there was an available, Orem or Santa Fe or somebody else had an available third party to go to, they would be going to them. And there's just not somebody in the area, as far as a third party to take fire equipment to. As far as our big equipment, like particularly our sanitation vehicles, there are some options in Salt Lake City. Lake City, I don't know if you know, it's out near 21st South West Valley City. Lake City does do heavy equipment in the sanitation area, but you can imagine the trip there. We got to drop the vehicle off. We got to come back. I mean, that's a pretty heavy commitment to go to a third party that far away for those large vehicles. I think personally on the smaller vehicles like police cruisers and our typical smaller pickup trucks, I think we're remaining pretty competitive with the private sector. I think we have looked at that. It's not, I won't say, hey, we're 50% lower than the private sector. It's not like that, but I think we are staying just a tad below that private sector. And I should have introduced somebody here, a couple of people. In fact, Nancy Bean is our fleet manager. She's right here next to Greg Beckstrom, next to John. And Nancy has done a lot of work. Nancy, do you want to add anything as far as the outsourcing question?
Yeah. As far as outsourcing, we look at our costs, and when we do it in-house, we have more control of the vehicles and the downtime that we suffer when we do have to outsource. One of the things that I've been involved with in Seattle as well as Redmond is pulling an in-house warranty. And that is being able to do anything up to a 6-hour job in-house and then having the dealerships pay us for it. And I've been talking to our dealers about that. With that happening, we would also be pulling in Springville and some of the other agencies around us would actually probably use us for doing their warranty work, which they wouldn't be paying for us, but we would be getting claim money back from the dealerships. So those are some of the things that we're looking at 2 years down the road, if not sooner. I kind of like to think sooner. That we just have to get tooling and permissions together, and I think that we're en route for getting that.
I think if you'd like a little bit more information, we can put, I'll ask Jimmy and Nancy to look into that. We can put some more information together for the council as far as overseeing the, outsourcing versus insourcing. I think our biggest concern with fleet is the timing and are we a priority in getting it, for police and fire, emergency equipment.
I also remember there was something about the fuel island that we were talking about moving it or making some adjustments to that. Or
Yep, you're exactly right. Right now, our existing fueling island is in that exact same location, and we have had some discussions with the architect since that time, and it's primarily driven by a discussion about natural gas availability. And if we were to apply for a grant to the state and get a grant for natural gas fueling station, the question is could we add it here without moving this, or do we go to another site across the road here? And it's not focused very well. There, and I think it's actually a piece of property owned by Energy. It's about 2.5 acres, and the question is what's the future of that 2.5 acres? And we've kind of kicked around a couple ideas. Travis would probably be mad at me for not consulting with him on that, but that is a fuel option across the road there. So do we free this up? But there is some discussion that still needs to happen on compressed natural gas, because we have done some investigation, particularly in the sanitation side of going to compressed natural gas in those vehicles. Right now, the engines, and I think we just did a test like 2 or 3 or 4 months ago. It's been fairly recent. And we took an empty sanitation vehicle, compressed natural gas, and took it into the foothills in Provo, and it was struggling empty to get up those hills. And those engines just have not been quite developed to the point where you can do those hills, especially when it's full.
and if we ever do go to the natural gas, what does that do to our mechanics? And I have a car that I can't even take to a regular mechanic anymore.
I think that if we're going to go that route, then we need to find mechanics and go through the training, get them ready to do that conversion so that we can handle that in-house.
Isn't it natural gas that takes them warming up in the morning in the winter?
It does. It's a
They
little
can't
bit.
just go, they have to, I think some.
It's a little bit different, and also even the diesel, because of the new requirements on the diesel, there's some very specific things that our drivers have to do before they start out in the morning, and even sometimes depending on the regen rate, is that what it's called? I'm trying to think here what that issue is, but even if in some cases they have to stop during the day and let the engine rev and regen so that it's cleaning out the engine. Is that a fair way to describe that?
Yeah, it's basically once all the carbon has built up, then it's got to burn it off for clean emissions.
That's in CNG or the diesel?
That's in diesel.
That's diesel right now.
That's in current diesel requirements.
With the CNG, there are 4 classes a year for getting mechanics certified on CNG. And we've been looking into it, we're just not there yet. We're waiting for technology to kind of catch up with it.
There's not a hybrid type that would, or is there such a thing in those kinds of trucks? They would have some sort of backup or some sort of.
They do.
Something that would help them on the hills.
I'm on the hills now.
No, nothing.
No, in fact, I talked to Salt Lake City and I talked to Salt Lake County, and they've had some real problems getting up on the hills. And so they've got some CNG for in the valley, but then they've got some regular diesel that are going in the mills. And at this point, with the amount of trucks that we have, we can't break them up because they're used for everything.
I know the big concern too with CNG is that in order for it to work for us, we really have to have our own filling station. And it's a pretty significant capital investment. And then, for example, this year, it wouldn't have been a great payback with gasoline being priced as low as it's been. But in other years, it would have been more of a payback. It does take longer time to fill too.
There's a quick fill, there's a slow fill, and the slow fill is a better way to go because you can get your complete tank filled. Fast fill, you only get 3/4 of your tank filled.
Springville's the closest CNG station?
I think the closest one is just as you, going down Geneva Road, entering into Orem.
Geneva and University Parkway, up by the old MATC building, there's a CNG station, that's probably the nearest one.
With Line J too, right?
The architect that we are working with on the covered parking for the sanitation vehicles, we have asked so that underneath the slab for the building, we prepare for compressed natural gas filling so that we've got the sleeves, we've got the needs there if we can go that direction in the future or not have to tear up something. So that is part of the discussion.
For me, as I look at this, we're either in or we're out, and if we're in, we got to spend the money. If we're out, then we outsource it and we go a different direction. But didn't you say OSHA is, we have a few places that we're in trouble already?
Yeah,
you know, some of those pictures with the.
Yeah, I don't want to spend too much time on that, but those pictures, I mean, I think they speak 1,000 words. We've got some issues there.
Thank you. The current proposal includes the outdoor, the overhang parking, where we call it,
the covered parking.
And the offices?
Yes.
The office space.
Yes. So what we would, the minimum, what we would try to do is we would try to get 8 bays. You know, if we can do all 12, that's fine, but if we can enclose at least 8 bays, the offices and the covered parking in the first phase, that's the goal. Plus, you know, the asphalt, utilities, things that are associated with that building.
Thank you, Dave. We appreciate your attention and your staff's attention to these important needs for our city. And John, thanks also for your help financing grant funding.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, we're halfway through our agenda. Let's take a 5 or 10 minute stand and stretch break. Yes. And then we'll
Our meeting will then begin the second part of our agenda. We'll turn to a discussion on the proposed rate and fee changes, also as included in the mayor's proposed 2016 budget. And I think Denise is going to lead this discussion for us.
So I'm just gonna go through, I don't know if it's the best mechanism, but I had all the departments provide the information to me, so I just have a spreadsheet and I'll provide that. Still working on it last night with Roger. And so, then there should be a folder called like 2016 budget, yeah, right on. And then just that fee rate changes. Do you want to put me back at the beginning of the spreadsheet now? I can just go over, right? Or are you guys gonna have to tap that probably? Go to the very top, yeah, just go to the very front of the, yeah, go to the very front, and I'll probably have you just on the edge. Is that okay? Because I can't toggle this. So I'm just gonna go through the tabs, and some of them don't have any things, and then we'll stop around a little bit along the way. So engineering actually is not proposing any rate changes. And so if we want to go to the airport tab. So the airport tab, there's three things that they've actually included in their budget. They're looking at charging a monthly rental car parking fee of $50 for the rental companies that are down there at the airport. And I don't know how many cars there are down there. And I could get that information if we need to. And then they're actually proposing the landing and the passenger fee, 60 cents per 1,000 pounds, which would be charged to the carrier, yeah, and then the passenger fee would actually be added to the ticket for the passenger, and that's 65 cents per passenger. And so you'll see his little thing there, pending approval from Allegiant City Legal Review. So Steve's working through that. Steve Gleason is the airport manager, so that's a proposal there. You can skip the UTF tab and just go to the water. So everything on here on the water is almost all just the rates, which they talked about on Tuesday. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on any utility rates. And you want to just arrow here just a little bit, make sure, because I didn't think there was anything else on there. Yeah. And so if we want to go to the sanitation tab, on the sanitation tab, we just have the dollar that was discussed at length last Tuesday in different meetings about the household recycling. So that's the only thing that sanitation is proposing is that.
That's the fee, they're gonna start doing it weekly rather than every other week, right?
Yeah, and that'd be that dollar.
For the blue can.
Yeah. So the stormwater fee is just what they're proposing is the rate increase, and that's based on ESUs. And so, like I said, they've discussed that. Wastewater, the majority of theirs are rates, but they're changing a bunch of other stuff. They actually have hauled in waste and wastewater surcharge fees. So you'll see that they're changing some of those things. They're adding a standard monitoring fee there. And so, like I said, I'll send that so that you can see all those new ones.
You know what that monitoring fee is for?
Do you know, Jimmy?
I can't remember.
I'll before I send that, I'll ask Mark Hogan. He's the wastewater manager. So energy, the only thing that they had was their utility rate increases that were just discussed on Tuesday. Let's go back one more thing. The pull attachment fee for energy. Yeah. So pull attachment fee, originally when they were doing the pull attachment contracts with the providers, they were including this fee in some form in the contract. And what they want to do is start charging a fee separate from that contract. All those contracts are expiring.
Yeah, it's been, and the fee has been $5 per poll for 20, 30 years.
Years or something, yeah.
For a really long time, and almost all, if not all, of the agreements have expired. And as we, beginning with Google, and as we've negotiated new pull attachment agreements, we stayed in all the agreements for the moment at $5, but we included language that allowed that fee by contract to be raised at any time by the district council. There's a complicated FCC formula that we can't exceed as far as how far we can raise it, but otherwise the council can raise it as long as it's under that cap.
So we're just proposing that. I want to go to miscellaneous. The only thing that's in there is the grammar request, and that's kind of all over the place. So I just kind of took like a basic fee. You can charge basically your lowest paid person. We've chose to put that at $10 right now. So that for the most part, most of the time, it's $10 plus you can charge for each page and those type of things. One of the departments especially is the police department. They get tons of grammar requests for accidents, all sorts of things. What happens is a person calls and says, I need it. They go do all the work, the person never comes and gets it. And so what they're asking us to do as when we do propose a new fee, so we're proposing that our minimum would be $15 and that's due upon the time of request. So that when you make a request that you need an accident report or whatever they're asking, they're at least gonna pay $15 to generate this. You know, we do all the work, and we've had that in finance before. We've had people ask for things and we prepare it and then no one ever comes and gets it. And so they're just asking that not only do we increase the fee to 15, but that we ask that a minimum be collected at their request.
Is that something that insurance adjusters are requiring, but they're not really requiring?
Well, you get
so many people coming for that.
Yeah, insurance companies are a lot of them where they'll request it and then they'll just kind of never
need
you know, or sometimes people will say they need their accident report probably to give and they'll never come. So a lot of, I know that police and fire have a lot of those requests. Like I said, we've had a few before, but we don't, not too many. So
The other thing that'll happen is criminal defendants will show up at their arraignment and decide they want to go get a copy of the report. But then by the time they request it, they go get counsel, and their counsel files a discovery request and gets it directly from the legal office, and so then they never come back.
Yeah, so there's that.
I was just curious, is this one of those skills that you sort of estimated what our costs are?
yeah, you by statute, correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, you can only charge, what it reads is you can only charge the amount of the lowest
paid employee
Employee that's
qualified
paid, yeah.
to do the research.
to do the research. And so some cities, it's not uniform, some cities may feel like the lowest paid person is $30 or whatever, so it's not uniform across cities at all because of the way it reads. You can't charge benefits, it's not like you can say that our benefits are 40% and add that, you can't do overtime, any of those things. And so I think it's pretty minimal, and I think to keep it that, have people question if we're those type of things, but I know there's other cities that are $30, $40, $50 from what Janine's told me from the recorder's office. But
So this would be saying like if you pick the $30 number that on average it takes about half hour.
yeah, half hour, you know, maybe, yeah, this is basically saying that most of the information, especially with probably the most requests, can be done in a half hour or so.
Do you think that's reasonable or is it typically or less?
When you have the big ones, Brian can, lots of times things will go to legal and all those type of things. And then you can charge more because you can do it based per hour. This would just be our minimum. So I would say the departments that's getting the most requests, police and fire, I think that would be, you know, a good amount to do because most of theirs it's their, you know, I mean, we've got a few in personnel or finance that take a longer time, but you can also continue to charge more based on that too.
Yeah, you can calculate the actual cost. So for large requests, we do. And it's actually a little bit more time than just calculate because the statute also says you can't charge for the first 15 minutes.
Yeah. So Covey Center.
Kelly, do you have a question?
On the flip side, that doesn't just guarantee the person if they really want to become.
Exactly, yeah. And I think that's what they're finding is that's the biggest frustration is you're taking a person from doing something else to go do this and then you end up with all this stuff and no one came. So I think that's what they're asking there. Here we have the Covey Center. So just making some changes to the main hall rental, and there's an A and B rate, but I've kind of put some information up when we send this to you that you'll kind of see. So raising some rates there. They're also doing some rates for things they haven't charged for, the snow machine. I don't know how many people use the snow machine, but they're gonna pay $200, I guess. And you get the snow, what a deal. So a couple of those other things they just haven't been charging for them, and there is a cost to those things. So So pretty minimal there. And then parks, I kind of put these in a bunch of different tabs. We'll just kind of go through. If you want to start at the top, or Louise just on the top one. That's okay. No. So here we had all these categories. So there's a lot of housekeeping stuff on here too. But what they want to do is just go to our proposed fee. Basically, they've kind of been all over the place depending on the tournament. And now they're just saying any softball tournament that's NSA certified is $250. And that's per team. And then everything else we're going to remove from the schedule. So as you go down here a little bit, you'll see we've got, some youth things going from $27 to $33. Pretty minimal, and that kind of goes down through the entire schedule for youth and adult sports. I'm trying to think if there's, like I said, a lot of it is some cleanup, just to kind of clean up the consolidated fee schedule. And I'll send this to you in detail so that you can look at it. But I don't know if there's a really easy way. I don't know if anybody's really looked at the consolidated fee schedule in the code book. It's pretty long. So we just tried to put it in some tabs that I think will help you get through it and kind of trying to show you what we're charging now.
And you are recommending to decrease in the fee for the softball and baseball rental?
Yeah, there was a couple, there's a few decreases, but not very many.
I had someone call me on that.
On the equipment rental stuff?
No, just the field rentals saying that we were higher. I was surprised that we were higher than the others. But that's this person.
Yeah. Okay. So next one. The golf course. A lot of these things we're just cleaning up of what they're actually calling it. So not a lot there. Go up to the top just in case. But most of these we're just changing some of the language. We have a lot of duplicates that we're all saying the same things, and so most of this was just some cleanup of trying to clean up the consolidated fee schedule itself, so nothing there. In the cemetery, we have cremation that's going from 300 to 450. Senior center, that's actually in part of the recreation center now, and so what they're going to do is we're going to, on the consolidated fee schedule, ask that just be moved into the recreation center. And so we're going to be removing a lot of the things and just looking at classrooms, and then the multi-purpose is what they're calling the senior citizen area. And so just made some changes there to some costs. So recreation classes, they're actually doing a lot of things over there. Making a bunch of changes to adding some computer classes at the cost. Wellness sessions, they're actually removing from the consolidated fee schedule. They're adding a ukulele class. I guess that, so. And we actually just have some cleanup in there, but we have a lot of things that they've had that they're keeping, and then just a lot of things. These are most of the ads here. Fly fishing, sign language, parent-child cooking, art and nature. So a lot of these that they're adding new classes for. And they're actually doing a ski program through Sundance, and that was new. They did that this winter. And so they got a grant to do that, but those are some things that to do there. And that's pretty cheap after I had kids who snowboarded. So like I said, then they're making some changes just to the Halloween Carnival and the Science Palooza. That Halloween Carnival, you'll actually get in with your recreation center pass, or then they have an adult or a senior and children. And then the Science Palooza is the adults are free. They're charging for kids. In the past, it was $3 per person. And there's not a senior prom anymore. And then they started the Mardi Gras. I think this was the second year. And so then just the cost for that. And it looks like they're reducing the skate park a little bit too. So, the library, the only thing that we have on there is the ballroom rentals. So let's go to the fees. So what I wanted to talk a little bit about this is through the Citizen Budget Committee, we had a pretty big discussion about looking at 25 fees per quarter. And so I thought this would be a good comparison of some things that are actually included in the user fee, the user fees that we just talked about. So the airport, One thing that we had on there that we had looked at is parking. And so we looked at some things there. Nothing's been done at this time on the tie down container, so that's something that we'll continue to look at. But the airport actually talked about the air service fee for passenger and the landing fee. And so we're able to look at those. Community development, we haven't made any changes to the general plan amendment. There's nothing proposed. The ballroom rental was on there for the library. The other thing is we have the Parks and Rec looking at the grave opening and closing. And the recommendation from Roger is that we look at those cemetery fees when we open the cemetery expansion in May of 16. And so I felt like that would be a better time to look at that. I highlighted a lot of the parks and recreation, the remainder of those. As you'll see kind of at the bottom, we have pool rentals, swim lessons, swim team, community classes, senior classes. They actually looked at every one of those items on the user fee. There's some type of a change to each one of those categories. And then the other thing I have marked, and you'll see that I have sales tax over here, something that they have included in our budget, in the 16 budget, is the way we do sales tax right now. We basically charge somebody a flat rate. I'm just going to use $100. And then we pay the tax out of that $100. Because it is, if it's something that's taxable, we have to remit tax to the state tax commission. So right now, if we charge $100, we're giving $6 back to there. What the proposal is that here, now I come by my pass, it's $100. I actually pay whatever the tax rate is on the other side. So we're not backing into the tax on the passes. And that is included in the recreation fees for this 16 year. The only thing is that we've been talking about is if you look, I didn't highlight the admission at the door. So this is a person that comes in and I just want to come tomorrow. I may never come back. That's still, that'll probably be something that we'll continue to not charge the tax on there. Right now, I think it's $5. But the thing is, they are looking at is charging on that passes where it's a once a month charge or a once a year charge, depending on how people are renewing their passes. And then the Provo Peaks Ice Arena. I'm not on that board, but I review their financials and things. Those would be things that they are looking at doing that. I know that, but that would be something that their board, they have a board. We have members of Provo City and Utah County that would bring those back to make those changes on both cities. So I just thought that was a comparison that the council may want to see of connecting the committee, what we said that we look at and what we've looked at.
Just to make one comment. We're also planned and wanted at a date when the council wants to have, we'd like to have each of the directors and the key people come in and respond to those 25 items that were identified. And so Denise just touched on them real briefly, but we'd like to give them an opportunity to have some face time and come back and share with you the reasoning and the logic of why they're recommending what they're recommending with their fees. So.
Yeah, to that point, I think we almost need a category. So Denise is highlighted them in yellow, and that somewhat means the administration has evaluated them. But I say somewhat because it's really only what we feel like should be implemented July 1.
Yeah.
And it's not saying that they're closed out. But we kind of need a council closed out column.
Yeah, that's true.
Does that make sense? That,
yeah.
Okay, what's been done is enough. Or not, does that make sense? And check that box and check through the.
And move on to our next 25.
Yeah.
And I could set that up so that we could be adding that, so we could always have like a running record or something too. I could do that. So.
Perhaps as an appendix, it would be helpful to receive not necessarily details, but a description of the equation that you use, the formula.
The information. I think that's where it'd be good to get the directors into that. Yeah.
Consistent with what our council budget committee recommended as a basis for determining whether the fee structure change. Just as a reminder. Yes.
So that was all that I have. Like I said, I'll saw a couple of things along the way. I just want to make sure that I'll clean up the columns and stuff, and then I'll get that to the council staff. They can share that with you.
I have a question about the garbage recycling fees. I'm not sure if this is the right place to, or time to talk about it, but I hope that we would be given some options to, instead of raising the recycling fee, to either keep it the same and slightly raise the black can fee, or maybe even reduce.
State's been working on that, and it's probably not, wasn't ready for this meeting.
So we're coming back. We're coming back with a variety of scenarios.
Great, thank you.
We could do it on the work session.
Yeah.
Next Tuesday, if that.
With the sanitary, is that, I know that
Would be
the
ready
energy
for it.
department has a, what do they call it, ERP, an adjustment, an automatic adjustment, if the tipping fees were to go up, are the tipping fees volatile enough that we need to consider that?
No, they increase every year or two by $1. And so we've just traditionally taken that kind of information and worked it into the fee analysis.
We have,
So I don't think you need an
not-
escalator like you do with the power or fuel adjustment.
Do we have a fuel tax adjustment? That's,
Yeah, you have a fuel,
And
fuel
is
or
that-
power cost adjustment that exist in other fees, but not in this one, not in sanitation.
not in sanitation.
There are no other questions. We'll move right into the discussion on the proposed property tax increase then.
Want me to share the information I have? There's
Sure.
some on there. It's very small, and then, it's just, I just kind of do a little quick little thing. It's just in that same folder. This one too? Yep, and then just that property tax info. So, nothing too fancy, just some information. So what the proposal that's on the table is you have the property tax, which is just a little over 4 million. And that number actually comes from actual 14 number. And then we did a percentage of 1% growth, which that's where we've been in the past. And we get, if we do have the growth, we actually get the growth without doing a truth in taxation. And so that's where the 4,064 number would come from. That's what I started as the base. So the 2.28% that we're talking about of the possible, and I have the TIT, that's just truth in taxation property. That's the 92,663. And then the tax redemption of 285,000, that's basically people who are paying their taxes late, and we get that. So that's not included in that initial tax estimate. So that's your collection is the 285. So I left that out of the calculation. But what I wanted to share with you just a little bit of what that 2.28% of the almost $93,000 is. That's for an entry level police officer one. And I got, it takes almost $10,000 to outfit an officer between all the things that he needs. And so I got that from Lieutenant Post. And then when he gets here, he's gonna need a vehicle. And so that's a 5-year lease payment for him to come here and have a vehicle that's basically got a computer and the camera and that type of thing. So that's what's making that dollar outfit. So that's all I have to share, just so that you would know what those dollars would be for, how that was calculated.
Denise, could you kind of just describe quickly as far as the process, as you understand, as far as truth and taxation in August?
Yeah, I talked to it a little bit with the county. We do need to provide notice to them that we are going to be holding a hearing, and you can actually do that as late as your meeting in June. But they suggest if we do know that we're going to do that, that we notify them sooner, because we can't have a meeting on the same night as someone else in our taxing entity. So like right now, I know that Payson City is going August 5th, I think is their date. That's the only one he knows about right now. So you might have to have a meeting somewhere different if someone in your taxing group is having it on the same night. So the sooner you know, then you can notify them. And then they provided, the notices go out in July, and that information needs to be on there. So that's why you have to notice before the end of June. And then we're required to do special advertising in the paper. I think, as we all know, it has to be a full-size type thing. We have to calculate what the average home is, and the county assessor will give us what the average property value is and those type of things to do that. And then we basically need to have it adopted, whether we adopt it with the property tax or we don't. We have to have our final budget adopted by August 17th. So those are kind of the timelines. And you can have the truth and taxation hearing after July 22nd, I think, and not be 10 days, not before 10 days after that. I think I'd have to read that for sure, but there's a timeline for those notices to go out of when your meeting's going to be before you can hold the meeting.
You can adopt the entire budget in August, so you don't have to adopt the budget.
You're going to have to, what we've done, you'd have to adopt a tentative budget because we start July 1st and we'd have to have, so you adopt a tentative budget with the idea that you have a truth and taxation hearing. And so, the only thing that we're looking at it basically mean that we wouldn't provide funding for that $93,000, but we would need to adopt
on June 7th.
June, I can't remember what the date is. Is it the 16th? Yeah. So we'd have to say that we were adopting the tentative budget with the thing that we were doing the truth and taxation, so that we'd have basically a budget for July 1st, knowing that we're going through a truth and taxation if we decide to do that.
So that 2.28 is a percentage of the city, but the city.
That's just a percentage of that 4,006,4. That's all it is. It's just a percentage of that $4 million.
$4 million.
Just the property tax. So, yeah, we're saying that.
Okay, so help me, because this is where I think a lot of residents get confused about how much it is. We say we're going to raise the property taxes a certain percent, and there's a percent on the property tax, there's a percent on the county tax, and there's a percent on the city tax.
Yeah.
And that gets confusing. And I was also wondering if you had I know that the city did when the school board did theirs, the average cost. How much is the average cost on?
We could go do that.
On a $210,000.
I think the last time I looked, it's like a $217,000 house as an average, but I can get that. Then we can go calculate our current tax of the tax levy, and then I can calculate it with that levy asking for those dollars. So I can do that, so we have some, and then we can actually see that it's going to be really tiny. It's going to be tiny.
It is, and that's what people don't realize. They start thinking, 2% or whatever it is, and is it my whole tax going up 2%? No, it's the city portion of the tax, and that's what gets real.
Last time when we proposed 2%, I think the total was like 0.17.
$2.70 a year or something.
Yeah,
it was
the total to their bill was 0.17%.
Yeah.
I believe on the notice, you still have to show the 2 point.
I think you have to show your percentage, but then you can show an average. Yeah, that's part of their little thing. There's like 3 ways to show what it's going to do to your tax rate. But we could throw together some real quick things of what that really means per month or monthly. It'd be really easy. We did it with the road. We've done it with the road bond. So that's all I had. I just wanted you to know what that 92,000 was.
I missed what the tax redemption was for. Could you explain that?
Oh, the tax redemption, the $285,000. You have people paying their property tax late. You have actually up to 5 years before they come and do a tax sale. So we're constantly getting people who are paying from 5 years ago their taxes that they're owed. So you get it becomes different. So that the property tax there is everybody who's current, the 4 million. All the other is people who are 5 years behind or 4 years behind or whatever. So
that number kind of bounces around.
It's
really hard to predict exactly.
During the recession in 2008, when we had a lot of that, we weren't collecting a lot of our people, just weren't paying and things were going to tax. So, but that's about where we're at the last couple of years.
But whatever that number is, it's going to be there regardless of whether we do.
Yeah, regardless if we do the other, it'll be there for the.
one thing that Larry pointed out in our proposed budget, the dollars actually go down.
We actually, we've been working on a document with the council staff and committee. Vehicle fees a few years ago probably used to be based on how much it was, how much your vehicle was. Now it's based on year. And so vehicle fees was not included in the property tax amount. It was down in fees on our schematic. And so it threw it off a little bit. So we went and calculated all those, and I'll send you those dollars amount. We went back and recalculated actuals from 3 years and took vehicle fees from the property tax amount and put them down in fees, so that you can see what they're.
So we are getting.
Yeah, yeah. And so, yeah, I have those dollars, so we'll have those too. So that was the vehicle fees were included, and that's probably been a couple of years now. So now it's based on year and not based on value.
It means what will take representative agenda be in August. August here.
I think it'd just be to talk about what it's, what we're proposing, what we're going to be asked to, just what we're asking to do. It'll be a.
So we'll include, in fact, a detailed report of the planned expenditures from the 1% increase.
No, it wouldn't be anything with the 1% because we get growth. The way the formula works right now, we get any growth, any new growth we get. So we're just counting that's what that we're going to get. The only thing that we have to ask for the truth and taxation hearing is the additional increment of the 2.28%. So that's all we talk about.
Is that times 3?
No, we're only two were proposed to do through other revenues, general fund revenues, and only one was proposed to do a property tax.
Thank you.
I think it's important to note too, at least from the administration's perspective, that we don't view this as a one-time ask, that we likely will be back next year funding an additional police officer. And hopefully, if we're able to do it out of the general fund, some out of the general fund, but this concept of using, if the taxpayers are comfortable with us keeping pace with inflation and using that to fund an additional police officer, that's what we're proposing. And that we can only do it 1 year at a time, but I think at least I'm viewing it as a tool that we'll use to get caught up with our police officers.
And then something else.
And then I think at that point, it's a decision. In my opinion, I think it's been a mistake over the years to not ask for this from our residents, to let us keep pace with inflation. I think it was Ryan that showed his little tool, and the difference it made if you adjusted this. In those two lines, it was amazing how much those two lines moved together on this one thing right here.
The other thing I would add too is the growth number, the 1%, in theory is we get new residents, build homes or move into Provo. The growth brings on additional cost for the city to support them, okay? But the residents that are continuing to just stay and live in Provo that we've served in the past, if the value of their properties go up, the rate goes down, so that source of revenue is flat. So it looks like revenue is growing by 1%, but really costs are growing because the population grew by 1%. So we're staying flat. So as the mayor mentioned, that the fact that we're not getting any factor for inflation for property taxes is very problematic.
This is a hedge against that.
Yes.
Newly instituted hedge.
Yes. So we
Once
tried
we
to
have 500 police officers, that would.
we tried the hedge, was it 2 years ago?
Yeah.
And it wasn't tied to anything. And I think people felt like, well, that's a lot of work for that much revenue. And tying it to a police officer, that makes it seem real. Like, oh, you're kidding, we can get a police officer by keeping pace with inflation. That seems like a reasonable ask.
In particular, if we do as Gary has recommended, and show what the actual increment is per household.
If I can share my recollection with that first attempt to do a property tax increase 3 or 4 years ago.
You're talking the small one or the big one?
The 17% one. Yeah, you're right. A couple years ago it was just inflation. Tying it to something I think is very important. When we went out and did public open houses, it's 17%, and we had a certain percentage for police officers. certain percentage for vehicles. And then we have this undefined amount for economic development. People were they even got behind the inflation to somewhat, and the police, but the undefined portion is what the council, in my opinion, felt very uncomfortable with, especially based off of public feedback, and that killed it. So my experience was as long as you tie it to some tangible need, people feel much better about it.
I think it also is a really good argument that we've found the room for two ourselves. We've made space, we've worked hard to fund two of them. We're only asking you for one of the three.
Now, and two of those, and this is kind of a frustrating question, I'm sure, Mayor, but two of those can be funded from the increase to the transfer to the general fund because of the increase of the fees. Is that correct? Are we funding it?
So if you wanted to tie it, but the problem is you've also got to list the increase in retirement costs.
Absolutely, and I totally understand that.
So yes, you could tie it to that if you wanted,
but there's so many things we could tie it to. I understand that. Okay. But let me ask another question about all the property that we lost at the hospital. That goes back to other properties. I don't know how much the value was that this hospital ended up getting, but the property tax that went back, we still get the same amount from the county. So that means that somebody what does that do to another person's property tax? Because we lost that.
Well, I think what it does is the city loses on it.
Does the city actually lose, or do we actually get the same amount?
It gets netted against growth.
Yeah.
And netted against growth?
Yeah, so we don't get the growth we would have got.
Right. Okay, so that.
But the result is that everybody else's rates go up a little bit.
Not necessarily if it's netted against growth.
Yeah. We don't reclaim that growth.
That's
part of the 1%.
That's what
it lowered that 1%.
Right.
But did the building that we sold on the ground to, did that move to property tax? Property tax, was that already paying property tax?
Which building?
Where we gave them the land and
that was already paying property tax. I checked on that one. Mostly it was paying property tax.
Mr. Chair,
Which surprised me.
I propose that we ask Kay to sell this.
Any other questions or discussion on this item? Matt, I think we underestimated the ability of this group to get through these four weighty items in a short order. We can either go back to rat tax.
Or we might
be going out for ice cream.
I have a question.
Yes,
Matt brought up a question for the action meeting, and I would like to have the council on this. He was thinking that'd be a good idea to have a formal vote of the council if we would like the budget committee to look at this next year's proposed budget. Just have a formal nod from the council. Yes or no, if you'd like the budget committee to look at this next proposed budget. Feedback, whatever.
Now the question is give feedback, ask
Give a
questions.
recommendation, give a, those kinds of things. We're happy to dig into the budget, but he just wanted a formal nod from the council to say that that's a council decision and not, that we're not. Anyway.
Well, there's two issues. One is, when the budget committee was formed, we didn't write anything down about norms, expectations, roles, specific tasks, relationship with staff. And since then, staff's been operating under the assumption that our role is a supportive role, but that we would continue to the council committee or budget committee, that we would continue to conduct our work as we've done in years past, and which includes an annual budget review. And there was some concern that the council committee took this on, that there was a doubling of efforts there. And when we look back at past meetings about discussion of the committee and focused on other specific topics like rat tax, but not the budget as a whole. Yesterday in the council budget committee, we internally agreed that staff would continue to do the work as we've done in the past, but we would certainly give the committee updates on a weekly basis as well as council members through email. And that from our work, if the council committee, budget committee wanted to dig in deeper or develop a specific recommendation, because that's not our approach, on that, we would again be happy to fulfill that supportive role, but we'll continue to do our work. So that's, I suppose, the clarification Kim's looking for is, does the council want to give more formal guidance to the committee about digging into the full budget review?
And there are some things that we can do as well that Larry's already been able to gather some information, but just looking at the total, how the total effect on the different income groups in our city, the total effect of the budget and the rates and all of the rate increases, the different ways that we're impacting the citizens in different, income groups. I don't know, did I describe it very well? Yeah. And so there are some specific things that we can focus on as a committee. We can also, where we can dig a little deeper. And so we're not running a parallel path with staff, but because they're going to provide, as they do, options and different things, but we could review those options, and if you would like, we could give a recommendation, or we could look at how that affects the everyday citizen, bring that back. I just wanted to have your input on what you feel would be most important for the budget committee to focus on as it pertains to the budget.
I just wonder when we start looking into the budget, that's pretty vague to me. And so I just wondered if there are certain things that we could coordinate with staff and say, all right, we're going to look on this together and we will make your assignment, these are the assignments. I just worry about when, like you say, parallel paths with just looking into it. Is there certain things that the council would like us to, certain assignments that you would like us to take on as a budget committee? And so we're specific on those areas.
Well, I think Larry, when we looked into it, Larry came up with a list of questions, that I think would be very, very salient questions to ask, and they can help us in that way in asking those questions. And
we've actually worked with administration. John Board has been kind enough to spend quite a bit of time on that. We're continuing to ask questions, and we actually have a lot of those answers already.
So that's something,
Yeah. What does the council actually want us to quote unquote look into, or assignments?
I'm not sure I'm smart enough. I'm comfortable enough to be insightful about council's budget committee's work. And I prefer the approach we've used thus far, which I think has served us well. And that is to say to the council, to the committee, what do you want to do? That is, what do you think is important? And from that, we've gotten an analysis of the sustainable budget over a 10-year period of time, the issues related thereto. We've got the guiding principles. We've got intent statements. And at this point, my own preference is to say that what is it you want to look at in the proposed budget?
I don't know that we've gotten those yet, though, Hal. We have a few recommendations, and so I guess we're coming forward with that. And that's one thing that concerns me is that I just want to make sure that we're going in a direction where we're not given something and deciding for the council.
We're not deciding, we would just be bringing.
And I appreciate that.
Or we would be bringing information or questions to ask, or those types of things. We've analyzed the budget, we could bring those kinds of questions for discussion.
Strikes me that the expertise that committee represents allows the sensitivity to what the issues are that they should deal with, that I'm in no position to identify.
I totally agree with what Hal just said. I like the way things are going. I like giving them some flexibility to tell us what they think we need to be looking at. As far as staff goes, I think we've got some real expertise there, so I think it's great that they're pursuing their normal process that they do every year, and I don't see those two things as being duplicative.
I think it can be complementary, that we'll do our work, and if the council budget committee would like to capitalize on anything we produce or build on it, or go on an independent track, that's fine with me.
Or have, if it's to be complimentary, or have them free at any point to comment on what the staff might analyze,
I think
and
last,
vice versa.
last year, I hate to be the memory of a group, but last year you did ask us to, we attended the meeting when the budget was approved, and we were asked to give input, and we said that we supported the budget, that we reviewed it. And so and I don't know if that's what you're talking about. If you're worried about not wanting to do it, or who do want to do this, we can do whatever is useful to the council. But I think last year that was helpful to have a second set of eyes, and I definitely don't want to get in the way of the staff's analysis. But if that's helpful, we'll do it. If it's not, we can keep, I'm sure we'll find lots of things to ask questions about. So.
Well, the issue is, should the two analyses be independent? And my own sense is no, they should be collaborative, complementary to the fullest extent, so as to amplify the expertise. And if it isn't too late, this may be something for next week's work meeting.
We can certainly bring it up in the work meeting. We can amend the agenda. It hasn't been published yet. One of the reservations I have is in our approach to analysis, we don't ultimately provide recommendations. We try to present alternatives and their trade-offs and consequences. So that's the only thing I'd be hesitant is that we would just like any alternatives that we generated as options for discussion and consideration, not to be limited to solely what the committee recommends.
And I like that the committee also comes back with a recommendation, and because we have looked at these options. And I think the more we can also broaden our, not just a recommendation, but these are the options. This is why we recommended this, because we looked at these options. And sometimes I just hope that the committee is not perceived as just pushing one item forward. That we, maybe as a committee, that's something we need to do a little better. Say we looked at these, and this is why we recommended this one. Because I have had some feedback that have said, all you guys want to do is raise fees. And that's not what we're dealing with.
And taxes. We want to raise taxes.
We're no respecter of revenue.
We're trying to be sensitive to the fact that we want to make sure that whatever the committee works on is something that's the council as a whole is good with. It wants us to do, and want to make sure that we're not assuming that the council wants us to look at this next proposed budget, but that it's something that the council would like us to do, would like us to evaluate, would like us to come back with, a recommendation, and just want to make sure that we don't have anyone feeling like we're, doing something that you wouldn't want us to focus on your camp.
Like looking at the budget and giving us as many recommendations and suggestions and that you feel like we should be considered.
Is that a motion?
Be happy to make it. Do we need to kind of include
Or we
what?
could wait until.
Or did you want to do a work session?
I think
Is that better to do in a work meeting?
I think we can take care of it now, unless you feel there's been some more discussion.
I think it would be helpful to me at least to have more time on the lines.
Well, thank you, Matt, for amending the work session agenda for next Tuesday. Motion to adjourn then? Kim, and a second? Colin, those in favor? Great, thank you.